The Unforgettable Adventure of Professor Corkbottom. Once upon a time in the quaint town of Maryville, there lived a peculiar professor named Quincy Corkbottom. He was known for his wild mop of hair, mismatched socks, and an uncanny ability to find amusement in even the most mundane situations. One day, Professor Corkbottom received a mysterious letter that invited him to explore the hidden treasures of an enchanted forest. Filled with curiosity and armed with an assortment of odd gadgets, Professor Corkbottom embarked on his grand adventure. With each step he took, he encountered strange creatures and absurd challenges that tested his wit and sense of humor. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he stumbled upon an oafish troll named Terry, who demanded a riddle before allowing anyone to pass. Unfazed, Professor Corkbottom quipped, "Why did the Scarecrow win an award?" "Because he was outstanding in his field." Terry burst into laughter and waved the professor through. Continuing his expedition, the professor discovered a group of talking mushrooms engaged in a heated debate over who would become their king. Acting as the mediator, Professor Corkbottom suggested a contest to determine the winner. The mushrooms were perplexed but agreed. The professor challenged them to a game of musical chairs, using tree stumps as seats. The finale was a boisterous affair, with the mushrooms hopping madly from one stump to another. After numerous rounds, one mushroom emerged victorious as king, and the others cheerfully accepted their new ruler. Deep within the heart of the forest, the professor's path intersected with a mischievous band of fairies who loved to play pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Professor Corkbottom devised a plan. He built a contraption that emitted bubbles filled with rainbow-colored paint. Floating above the unsuspecting fairies, he released a flurry of bubbles, covering them in a vibrant rave of colors. The fairies, initially startled, burst into laughter at their multicolored appearance. Delighted with his prank's success, they forgave the professor and shared tales of their own playful antics. As the sun began to set, Professor Corkbottom stumbled upon a hidden waterfall. Standing before him was an ancient tree that seemed to know secrets whispered by the wind. The tree informed the professor that his adventure had come to an end but left him with one final challenge: to make someone laugh with a joke that had never been heard before. Caught off guard, Professor Corkbottom scratched his head, pondering over this aching riddle. Suddenly, inspiration struck him like a lightning bolt. Why did the tomato turn red? "Because it saw the salad dressing," he exclaimed. The tree roared with laughter, its branches swaying with delight. With the challenge completed, the enchanted forest rewarded Professor Corkbottom with a magical map leading him back home. As he bid farewell to the creatures and friends he had met along the way, he knew he would treasure this unforgettable adventure forever. And so, Professor Corkbottom returned to Maryville, carrying with him not just memories, but a renewed sense of laughter and wonder. From that day forward, he would continue brightening everyone's lives with his unique brand of humor, reminding all who crossed his path that even in the most challenging times, laughter could be found. And thus concludes the whimsical tale of Professor Quincy Corkbottom, the jester of jokes, and his extraordinary expedition through the enchanted forest. The Misadventures of Professor Pumpernickel. Once upon a time in the whimsical town of Wackyville, there lived a peculiar inventor named Professor Pumpernickel. The professor was renowned for his brilliant yet comically unsuccessful gadgets. Despite the constant failures, he remained determined and hopeful, always dreaming of creating something extraordinary. One sunny morning, Professor Pumpernickel woke up with an idea that tickled his funny bone. He decided to invent a pair of shoes that could make him fly. With unmatched enthusiasm, he gathered all the necessary tools and materials and got to work. Days turned into weeks as the professor tinkered away in his workshop, concocting a contraption that would revolutionize footwear forever. Finally, after countless setbacks and paint spills, the professor unveiled his marvelous creation, the Flimysaur shoes. With excitement in his heart, Professor Pumpernickel strapped on his shoes and took them for a test run. As soon as he lifted his feet off the ground, he found himself soaring through the sky, giggling like a child. The townspeople of Wackyville watched in astonishment as the professor danced among the clouds. His reputation as an eccentric inventor fully intact. But as the saying goes, what goes up must come down. And that's exactly what happened to poor Professor Pumpernickel. While enjoying his newfound aerial view, he suddenly realized he had no idea how to descend back to solid ground. Panic set in, and he flapped his arms and legs frantically, causing the townsfolk below to erupt in laughter. As he soared over the town, Professor Pumpernickel spotted a hot air balloon drifting peacefully in the distance. In his desperation, he aimed himself toward the basket and, with a swift and clumsy landing, crashed right into it. To his surprise, the hot air balloon began to rise with him still inside, much to the amusement of both himself and the people of Wackyville. From that day forward, the streets of Wackyville became a playground for Professor Pumpernickel's unintentional comedy. On one occasion, he created a self-peeling banana that ended up sticking to everyone's noses. Another time, he invented an alarm clock that sprayed a stream of water at the sleeper's face, resulting in many unintentional hairdos and damp mornings. Despite the laughs and occasional mishaps that accompanied his inventions, Professor Pumpernickel never gave up. His dream of creating something truly remarkable still burned brightly within him. The townspeople of Wackyville admired his determination and found solace in the joy they experienced from his mishaps. And so, the tale of Professor Pumpernickel's misadventures continued, bringing laughter and happiness to people of all ages. With each failed invention, he taught them the importance of perseverance, humor, and embracing the whimsy that life brings. After all, sometimes the greatest inventions are the ones that make us smile, even if they weren't exactly what we had in mind. The Misadventures of Franklin the Forgetful. Once upon a time in the whimsical town of Cloverton, there lived a kind-hearted but incredibly forgetful old man named Franklin. He was known far and wide for his forgetfulness, which often led to amusing and laughter-filled escapades. One sunny morning, Franklin woke up with a twinkle in his eye and a peculiar idea in his mind. He had decided to throw a grand party for all the townsfolk. Word spread quickly, and the townspeople were abuzz with excitement, eagerly anticipating the festivities that lay ahead. Franklin's enthusiasm was contagious, and he set to work meticulously planning every aspect of the party. He sent out vibrant invitations, decorated the streets with colorful banners, and even hired a band to keep the revelers entertained. However, as Franklin was busy making preparations, he began to forget crucial details. He would arrange for the cake delivery but forget to mention the flavor, leading to a hilarious mishap when the baker delivered a gigantic onion cake instead of the anticipated chocolate delight. Next, Franklin went shopping for decorations. But as he entered the store, his memory betrayed him yet again. He ended up purchasing an assortment of mismatched items, including a pink flamingo lawn ornament and a disco ball, instead of the standard party decor. Undeterred by these mishaps, Franklin soldiered on, convinced that everything would turn out fine. As the day of the party arrived, the townspeople eagerly gathered at the town square, their anticipation blending with curiosity about Franklin's quirky forgetfulness. As the band struck up a lively tune, Franklin donned his chef hat and apron to prepare a feast fit for a king. However, his forgetfulness once again got the better of him. Franklin mistook sugar for salt and added a mountain of sugar to the main course, leaving everyone puzzled and laughing at the unusually sweet spaghetti. But the fun didn't end there. Franklin, always the jolly soul, decided to entertain the crowd with a magic show. Armed with a deck of cards and a top hat, he began his act, only to realize he had forgotten the magic words. Instead of rabbits appearing out of the hat, Franklin pulled out an assortment of vegetables, much to the amusement of everyone present. Despite the comical mishaps, the townspeople had the time of their lives. They danced under the disco ball, laughed at the mismatched decorations, and embraced the chaos Franklin's forgetfulness had inadvertently created. In the end, Franklin's forgetfulness turned out to be a blessing in disguise. His unintentional blunders had brought laughter and joy to the town of Cloverton. From that day forward, the townsfolk celebrated Franklin's forgetfulness as an essential part of their community spirit, hosting an annual Forget-Me-Not festival in his honor. And so, the legend of Franklin, the forgetful old man who unintentionally thrived on spreading laughter, continued to brighten the lives of the people in Cloverton for generations to come. Remembering to forget the tale of Franklin's unforgettable party. The hilarious misadventures of Professor Quirkington. Once upon a time, in the charming town of Whimsyville, there lived a renowned but eccentric scientist named Professor Quirkington. He was known far and wide for his wild experiments and peculiar inventions that often had hilariously unexpected outcomes. One sunny morning, as Professor Quirkington was rummaging through his cluttered laboratory, trying to find his missing sock, he stumbled upon an old dusty book hidden behind a stack of papers. The title read, "The Ultimate Recipe for Endless Laughter." Intrigued by its contents, the professor decided to try it out, hoping it would add a touch of mirth to his otherwise dull routine. Following the recipe's instructions, Professor Quirkington mixed a pinch of tickle powder, a spoonful of giggles, and a handful of chuckles. As he stirred the concoction with a twinkle in his eye, the mixture began to emit vibrant colors and amusing sounds. The professor poured the bubbling mixture into a vial, excited about the potential hilarity it promised. Eager to share his newfound creation, Professor Quirkington invited the townspeople to his grand unveiling. Families, children, and even pets gathered in the laboratory, brimming with anticipation. The professor, unable to contain his excitement, uncorked the vial, releasing a wave of laughter into the room. But to everyone's surprise, instead of bursting into fits of uncontrollable laughter, the townspeople transformed into comical versions of themselves. Bakers grew elongated noses that quivered like dough, making bread-shaped honking sounds when touched. Policemen sprouted clown shoes and began patrolling the streets with exaggerated, bouncy steps. The entire town metamorphosed into an uproarious carnival of rolling laughter. At first, some were bewildered by their absurd transformations, but soon, their confusion gave way to amusement. The townspeople embraced their altered appearances and reveled in their newfound silliness. Laughter filled the air as everyone delighted in the infectious joy that had swept across Whimsyville. Professor Quirkington, taken aback by the unexpected results, scurried around town, tickling noses, and concocting antidotes to revert the townspeople to their original forms. But the more he tried, the more absurdly hilarious the transformations became. The laughter echoed through every corner of Whimsyville, with even the animals joining in on the uproar. Days turned into weeks, and the townspeople didn't seem eager to return to their former selves. They found delight in the simplest tasks, turning everyday occurrences into side-splitting adventures. Children bounced on trampolines made of bubble gum, while adults carried out serious conversations with balloon-like voices, causing tears of laughter for all who heard. Finally, Professor Quirkington realized that his town no longer needed an antidote. In their transformed states, the townspeople had discovered the true magic of laughter. With hearts full of joy, they celebrated their newfound hilarity, relishing in the unique charm that had enveloped Whimsyville. And so, the townspeople of Whimsyville continued their mischievous, giggle-filled lives. Every now and then, when a new discovery was made in Professor Quirkington's laboratory, the delightful laughter of the townspeople would grow stronger and infinitely more contagious, reminding them that life was best lived with a healthy dose of whimsy and laughter. And thus, Whimsyville became a place where happiness bloomed, and laughter overflowed, a testament to the magical power of humor in even the most unexpected circumstances. The end. The Misadventures of Whiskers the Cat. Once upon a time in the peaceful town of Meadowville, there lived a mischievous little cat named Whiskers. With his bright orange fur and mischievous green eyes, he roamed the streets, causing all sorts of funny and unexpected chaos. One sunny morning, Whiskers woke up feeling particularly adventurous. He decided it was high time to explore the mysterious forest on the outskirts of Meadowville. So off he trotted, his fluffy tail held high, and an undeniable air of curiosity surrounding him. As Whiskers entered the thick foliage of the forest, he stumbled upon a family of squirrels having a lively debate about who had the tastiest acorns. Intrigued, he decided to join in on their fun. Climbing up a nearby oak tree, Whiskers leaped from branch to branch, amusing the squirrels with his acrobatic antics. Little did he know that his acrobatics disrupted a peaceful nap for a wise old owl, who decided to teach that pesky cat a lesson in humility. As Whiskers continued his playful adventure, he came across a rickety old bridge that stretched over a sparkling river. Unable to resist, he began crossing the bridge, his tiny paws testing each wooden plank for stability. Suddenly, the bridge creaked and groaned under his weight, and before he knew it, he found himself clinging on for dear life as the bridge swung precariously back and forth. The squirrels, now watching from a safe distance, burst into laughter at the sight of Whiskers' predicament. Just as Whiskers thought his misadventures couldn't get any worse, he stumbled upon a beehive hanging from a low branch. Being a lover of all things sweet, he couldn't resist the temptation and decided to give it a quick swipe with his paw. In an instant, angry bees swarmed around him, chasing him through the forest as he darted and weaved between trees. Finally, exhausted and thoroughly humbled, Whiskers found solace beneath a large mushroom, praying for the bees to buzz away. To Whiskers' surprise, the wise owl that he had disturbed earlier appeared before him. But instead of scolding him, the owl offered some much-needed advice. "Whiskers," the owl hooted, "remember that sometimes misadventures can teach us the most valuable lessons. Seek happiness in your own surroundings, rather than disrupting the peace of others." From that day forward, Whiskers learned to appreciate the simple joys of Meadowville. He spent his days basking in the sun, chasing butterflies, and enjoying the company of his fellow townsfolk. The squirrels forgave him for the laughter he had caused, and the bees even stopped by occasionally to share some of their honey, now that Whiskers had learned his lesson. And so, the mischievous cat called Whiskers became a beloved member of the community, renowned for his funny and unexpected adventures. To this day, children in the town of Meadowville tell tales of a cat who learned that sometimes the greatest joy can be found right at home. The Misadventures of Professor Quibblebottom. Once upon a time in the whimsical town of Waffleville, lived a peculiar and slightly eccentric professor named Ebenezer Quibblebottom. With his wild mop of curly hair and mismatched socks, he was known for his absent-mindedness and knack for finding himself in the most hilarious situations. One sunny morning, Professor Quibblebottom set out on an expedition to discover the legendary treasure hidden deep within the treacherous Snickerdoodle caves. Armed with a worn-out map and an insatiable curiosity, he eagerly embarked on his quest. As he ventured into the dark, damp tunnels of the cave, Professor Quibblebottom soon realized he had forgotten his trusty flashlight. Undeterred, he decided to explore blindly, hands outstretched, hoping to stumble upon the treasure by chance. Little did he know that the Snickerdoodle caves were also home to a mischievous group of sprites. These little creatures delighted in playing pranks on unsuspecting explorers, and they found Professor Quibblebottom's bumbling antics particularly amusing. As the professor meandered deeper into the cave, he encountered numerous amusing obstacles. He tripped over stalagmites, mistook bats for friendly birds, and even stumbled into a hidden underground river. Much to his surprise, the river turned out to be made entirely of maple syrup. Covered in sticky goo, the professor continued his journey, taking occasional breaks to lick his fingers for sustenance. Unbeknownst to him, the sprites closely followed his every move, snickering and giggling at his predicament. After what seemed like an eternity, Professor Quibblebottom finally stumbled upon the legendary treasure room. To his delight, he discovered a chest overflowing with golden pancakes, chocolate coins, and jelly-filled donuts. Rejoicing in his find, the professor reached out to grab a pancake, only to have it transform into a giant, pancake-flinging catapult. Before he could react, he was propelled through the air, pancakes flying around him like frisbees. The sprites, now unable to contain their laughter, erupted into fits of giggles as the professor soared through the cave, attempting to catch pancakes mid-air while dodging others. It was a sight to behold. Eventually, Professor Quibblebottom managed to land safely, covered head to toe in pancake batter and syrup. Although he never did find the treasure he sought, he gained something far more valuable, a heart full of laughter and memories to last a lifetime. Returning to Waffleville as a local legend, Professor Quibblebottom became a beloved figure, entertaining townsfolk with his tales of the Snickerdoodle caves and his mischievous encounters with the sprites. His expeditions may not have always gone as planned, but the joy he brought to others was priceless. And so, the legend of the quirky professor and his misadventures lived on, reminding everyone that life is best enjoyed with a hearty laugh and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. The hilarious hijinks of Professor Pumpernickel. Once upon a time in the whimsical town of Maryville, there lived a renowned scientist named Professor Pumpernickel. With his wild hair, colorful lab coat, and knack for creating wacky inventions, the professor was loved by all the townspeople. One sunny day, as he was strolling through the town square, the professor stumbled upon a peculiar object lying on the ground, a pair of neon green goggles that shimmered in the sunlight. Curiosity piqued, Professor Pumpernickel decided to put on the goggles, unaware of the magical powers they possessed. As soon as he placed them over his eyes, everything around him transformed into a world of utter silliness. People were walking upside down, cats were meowing words instead of their usual meows, and trees danced to an imaginary tune. At first, the professor was bewildered but soon found himself chuckling at the amusing sight before him. He couldn't resist sharing the hilarity with the townspeople, who were equally astounded by the comical chaos caused by the goggles. Laughter filled the air, and Maryville became even merrier than ever. Word spread throughout the nearby villages about the professor's fantastical goggles. Soon, people from far and wide traveled to Maryville, eager to experience a world transformed by laughter. Visitors would rent the goggles from Professor Pumpernickel's lab, ensuring countless hours of uncontrollable giggles and guffaws. One fateful day, a mischievous elderly lady named Granny Gigglesworth paid a visit to the professor's lab. She had heard so much about the goggles and couldn't wait to see what all the fuss was about. But little did she know that her big, boisterous laugh was about to take the hilarity to another level. As Granny Gigglesworth put on the goggles, her laughter echoed through the town. People crowded around to witness the madness that ensued. The once stationary lampposts started tap dancing, the fish in the nearby pond took up synchronized swimming, and even the clouds shaped themselves into amusing caricatures of famous celebrities. The town square transformed into a carnival of laughter, with children rolling on the ground, clutching their stomachs, and adults unable to contain their glee. The joyous chaos continued for days on end, with the townspeople dancing, singing, and sharing jokes until their cheeks ached from laughing too much. But eventually, the professor realized that he needed to find a way to bring the silliness to an end. He knew that constantly wearing the goggles might have unforeseen consequences. So, with a heavy heart, he concocted a potion that, when administered to Granny Gigglesworth, would reverse the magic of the goggles. When Granny Gigglesworth finally removed the goggles, the town slowly returned to its normal state. The lampposts ceased their dance, the fish swam lazily in the pond, and the clouds regained their fluffy shapes. Although the townspeople missed the infectious laughter, they understood that laughter was best experienced in moderation. Professor Pumpernickel remained a beloved figure in Maryville, thanks to his inventive spirit and contagious sense of humor. People fondly remembered the days of mirth and merriment, forever grateful for the laughter that had brought them all together. And so, the people of Maryville continued to spread joy and laughter, knowing that life was always better with a little bit of silliness added to it. The Misadventures of Professor Pumpernickel. Once upon a time, in the bustling town of Whimsyville, there lived a peculiar and eccentric professor named Albert Pumpernickel. With his wild white hair, round spectacles perched on his nose, and a passion for inventing bizarre contraptions. Professor Pumpernickel had become a legend in the town. His creations were known to bring laughter, wonder, and sometimes chaos to the lives of all who encountered them. One sunny morning, Professor Pumpernickel woke up with a twinkle in his eye and a gleeful grin on his face. He had just thought of his most audacious invention yet, a machine that could transform vegetables into talking animals. He imagined the joy it would bring to children around the world. Without wasting any time, the professor hurried to his laboratory and began gathering all the necessary materials. He retrieved a carrot, a cabbage, and a beetroot from his garden and placed them in his peculiar-looking device, aptly named the veggie metamorphosis contraption. With a flick of a switch, the machine whirred to life, emitting a series of strange noises. First, the carrot transformed into a chatty parrot, flying around the room and squawking up a storm. Next, the cabbage turned into a bumbling rabbit, hopping around clumsily and munching on Professor Pumpernickel's prized books. Finally, the beetroot morphed into a mischievous monkey, swinging from the chandelier and making a mess of the professor's carefully organized lab equipment. Chaos ensued as the parrot squawked profanities. The rabbit hopped onto neighbors' lawns, and the monkey went on a rampage, flinging test tubes and beakers in every direction. Poor Professor Pumpernickel quickly realized that his brilliant invention was not as well thought out as he had originally believed. With a determined look on his face and a broom in hand, the professor set out to retrieve the escaped animals. He chased the parrot through Whimsyville's market, apologizing profusely to anyone who had been startled by its colorful vocabulary. The rabbit was finally caught after an intense chase, having left a trail of nibbled carrots and toppled flower pots in its wake. The monkey, however, proved the most elusive, leading Professor Pumpernickel on a wild pursuit through the town's rooftops and tree branches. After what felt like hours, the professor managed to coax the monkey down from a towering oak tree using a bunch of ripe bananas. Exhausted but triumphant, he led the mischievous trio back to his laboratory, grateful that no serious harm had befallen them or Whimsyville. With newfound wisdom, Professor Pumpernickel realized the importance of thoroughly testing his inventions before setting them loose upon the world. He made amends for the commotion caused by his veggie metamorphosis contraption, promising his neighbors and friends that he would be more cautious in the future. And so, the town of Whimsyville forgave the good-natured, absent-minded professor, valuing his contributions to their lives, no matter how chaotic they may sometimes be. From that day forward, Professor Pumpernickel continued his inventing endeavors, but always took the time to double-check and, of course, make sure there were no vegetables nearby. The end. The Misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in a quaint little town called Sillington, there lived a mischievous and curious cat named Mr. Whiskers. Mr. Whiskers had jet black fur, bright green eyes, and a tail that was always twitching with excitement. One sunny day, Mr. Whiskers decided it was time for an adventure. He strolled through the town, making sure to stop at every house and sniff every flower he passed. As he explored, he couldn't help but notice a peculiar smell coming from the bakery on the corner of Main Street. Unable to resist his curiosity, Mr. Whiskers stealthily sneaked inside the bakery. The aroma of freshly baked goodies overwhelmed his senses, and he felt like he had entered kitty heaven. Without thinking twice, he jumped onto a table and landed right in the middle of a batch of donuts. Feeling mischievous, Mr. Whiskers couldn't resist taking a nibble on one of the donuts. But oh boy, what a surprise awaited him. The donut turned out to be filled with spicy chili sauce instead of the usual sweet cream filling. His whiskers twitched, his eyes widened, and with a meow of shock, he ran straight out of the bakery, his face still tingling from the spicy surprise. As luck would have it, his hasty exit led him right into Mrs. Henderson's backyard. Mrs. Henderson was a sweet elderly lady who loved her garden dearly. Unfortunately, she hadn't realized just how much Mr. Whiskers had managed to get himself into trouble. Mrs. Henderson had spent hours meticulously planting rows of delicate tulips, unaware that Mr. Whiskers had become entangled in a roll of toilet paper. As he dashed around the garden trying to rub the spicy sauce off his face, he accidentally unraveled the entire roll, leaving a trail of toilet paper strewn across Mrs. Henderson's beloved flowers. Seeing the mess he had caused, Mr. Whiskers felt guilty. Determined to make amends, he decided to take matters into his own paws. With great determination, he began to carefully wind up the toilet paper, but wiggling as he went, and placing each tuft back on the roll. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Whiskers had successfully cleaned up his mess. He sat in the middle of the now somewhat disheveled garden, panting and covered in toilet paper, but feeling proud of his efforts. Unbeknownst to Mr. Whiskers, Mrs. Henderson had been watching the entire scene unfold from her kitchen window. When she saw him diligently fixing his mistakes, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. She rushed outside, scooped the well-intentioned feline into her arms, and showered him with affectionate strokes. From that day forward, Mr. Whiskers became Mrs. Henderson's beloved companion. Together, they would embark on many more misadventures, but their bond remained unbreakable. And whenever Mr. Whiskers caught the scent of chili sauce, he would remember the day he learned the importance of mischief mixed with a dash of kindness. And so, the tale of the misadventures of Mr. Whiskers became a legend in the town of Sillington, reminding everyone that even the most peculiar and seemingly troublesome creatures can bring joy and laughter into our lives. The whimsical adventures of Mr. McSnickerdoodle. Once upon a time, in the enchanted land of Cupcakeville, there lived a peculiar little fellow named Mr. McSnickerdoodle. He was a plump, jolly man with rosy cheeks and a twinkle in his eye. Everyone adored him for his charming personality and his knack for finding laughter in the most ordinary things. One sunny morning, as Mr. McSnickerdoodle strolled through the streets of Cupcakeville, he stumbled upon a mystical talking donut named Sprinkles. Sprinkles had a mischievous personality and a talent for transforming into different flavors every time he sneezed. Together, Mr. McSnickerdoodle and Sprinkles set off on a grand adventure, where they encountered a tribe of dancing cookies, a grumpy cup of hot cocoa, and a carrot cake who believed she was the queen of all desserts. Along the way, they collected jelly bean puzzles and lemonade bottles that granted magical powers when consumed. As they continued their whimsical expedition, they stumbled upon a towering castle made entirely of candy canes. It turned out to be the home of King Popcorn, the ruler of all things crunchy. King Popcorn, with his crown of caramel corn, was in desperate need of help to solve a candy shortage that gripped Cupcakeville. Mr. McSnickerdoodle and Sprinkles happily volunteered. With the aid of their newfound magic powers and the help of their cookie friends, they devised a plan to plant gumball seeds all around the kingdom. In no time, colorful gumball trees blossomed, unveiling an abundance of delectable treats for everyone to enjoy. The townsfolk of Cupcakeville rejoiced, throwing a grand celebration in honor of Mr. McSnickerdoodle and Sprinkles. The air was filled with laughter, music, and, of course, the mouth-watering aroma of sugary delights. As the party reached its peak, Sprinkles sneezed one last time, transforming into a cotton candy-flavored donut, much to everyone's delight. From that day forward, Mr. McSnickerdoodle and Sprinkles became cherished heroes of Cupcakeville. They continued to spread joy and laughter throughout the realm, reminding everyone to find humor in even the stickiest situations. And so, the story of the ever-smiling Mr. McSnickerdoodle and his whimsical adventures remained etched in the hearts of both young and old, a testament to the power of friendship, magic, and a good belly laugh. The end. The extraordinary journey of Bongo, the silly elephant. Once upon a time in the heart of the African savannah, there lived a gentle and silly elephant named Bongo. Bongo was known far and wide for his mischievous antics and infectious laughter. He was adored by all the animals and brought joy to their lives with his countless funny adventures. One sunny day, as Bongo strolled through the jungle, he stumbled upon a colorful flyer tacked onto a tree. It read, "Join the Great Animal Carnival." A whimsical celebration where laughter knows no bounds. Curiosity sparked within Bongo's big round eyes. With a wide grin on his face, he decided that this would be the perfect opportunity to showcase his talent for making everyone giggle. The next morning, Bongo set off towards the Grand Carnival. As he made his way through the jungle, he encountered various friends who joined him on his journey. First, there was Oliver, the cheeky monkey, followed by Lily, the graceful giraffe, and last, but not least, Toby, the timid tortoise. Together, they arrived at the vibrant carnival, where they were greeted by the lively tunes of the animal band. The music filled the air, and Bongo couldn't help but dance to the catchy rhythm. His wiggling trunk and clumsy moves had everyone laughing hysterically. Eager to participate in the carnival's competitions, Bongo and his friends signed up for a variety of amusing games. They tried their luck at coconut bowling, frog jumping contests, and even a synchronized swimming race in the sparkling river. Though Bongo's size gave him a slight disadvantage, his determination and enthusiasm won the hearts of both spectators and contestants alike. As the sun began to set, the final event approached, the comedy show. Bongo knew this was his moment to shine. Armed with humor and a tutu he borrowed from a kind zebra, he took the center stage. His jokes, delivered with impeccable timing, had everyone roaring with laughter until tears streamed down their faces. Bongo's performance was so uproariously funny that the carnival organizers decided to award him the title of official clown of the animal kingdom. The crowd erupted with cheers and applause, celebrating their silly friend's well-deserved recognition. Overjoyed, Bongo thanked everyone for their unwavering support. He shared a heartfelt message about the importance of laughter and unity, reminding everyone that life is much more enjoyable when shared with friends. With the carnival coming to an end, Bongo bid farewell to his newfound friends, promising to bring laughter wherever he went. As he returned home, his heart was full of happiness and memories of the extraordinary journey he had embarked upon. From that day forward, Bongo continued to spread joy throughout the African savanna. His silly antics and laughter echoed through the trees, making animals of all ages chuckle and smile. And so, the legend of Bongo, the silly elephant, lived on, reminding us all to never underestimate the power of laughter in bringing people together, no matter how big or small. The end. The Misadventures of Professor Bumblebee. Once upon a time in the small town of Whimsyville, there lived a quirky yet brilliant scientist named Professor Bumblebee. With his wild frizzy hair and oversized glasses, he was often mistaken for a bumbling buffoon. However, beneath his eccentric appearance lay a mind filled with unusual experiments and a heart brimming with an insatiable curiosity. One sunny morning, as Professor Bumblebee was conducting his latest creation in his cluttered laboratory, he accidentally spilled a mysterious concoction onto his beloved pet fish, Mr. Fins. Much to his surprise, the once ordinary goldfish started growing at an alarming rate until it was the size of a full-grown whale. Not one to let a situation go to waste, the professor decided to take Mr. Fins on an adventure. With the help of his trusty invention, the Transmogrifier 3000, they shrunk themselves down to fit inside Mr. Fins' magnificent tank. The moment Professor Bumblebee hopped on top of Mr. Fins' fin, they were off on their grand expedition. Their first stop was the enchanted forest, where trees sparkled with fairy dust and woodland creatures sang melodies only fairies could comprehend. The duo encountered talking squirrels, dancing rabbits, and even a sassy owl who had an amusing penchant for telling jokes about mice. The professor couldn't help but join in the laughter. Next, they ventured to the bustling city of Snickerdoodle. Here, the streets were lined with shops selling the most delicious treats. The scent of freshly baked cookies wafted through the air, making their stomachs rumble. The professor and Mr. Fins feasted on towering ice cream sundaes and giggled as they watched people struggle with their oversized burgers. Their escapades took them deep into the heart of the mystical mountains. The pair encountered a clan of mischievous yet friendly pixies who challenged them to a game of hide-and-seek. Professor Bumblebee, with his lanky frame and comically large glasses, was far from stealthy. Yet, the pixies were kind enough to pretend they couldn't spot him, resulting in uproarious laughter that echoed throughout the mountains. As their adventure neared its end, Professor Bumblebee and Mr. Finns stumbled upon a hidden island known as Jovial Jungle. In this magical place, exotic animals roamed freely, each with their own unique personality. They met a wisecracking monkey who loved cracking jokes, a tap-dancing elephant, and a melodious crocodile who harmonized beautifully with the birds. Finally, with hearts full of joy and laughter, Professor Bumblebee and Mr. Finns bid farewell to the wondrous world they had explored together. Using the Transmogrifier 3000, they returned to their normal sizes and made their way back home to Whimsyville. From that day forward, Professor Bumblebee and Mr. Finns became the town's beloved celebrities, sharing tales of their extraordinary journey and spreading laughter everywhere they went. And so, the curious scientist proved that sometimes the silliest mishaps can lead to the most memorable adventures. The Misadventures of Captain Whiskers. Once upon a time in the whimsical town of Maryville, there lived a peculiar cat named Captain Whiskers. Not your ordinary feline, Captain Whiskers had a wild imagination and an insatiable curiosity that often landed him in hilarious predicaments. One sunny afternoon, as Captain Whiskers lounged lazily on a cushion, he overheard Mrs. Jenkins, the local bakery owner, complaining about her missing secret ingredient from her famous apple pie. Unable to resist a great mystery, Captain Whiskers decided it was his duty to solve the case of the disappearing secret ingredient. Without wasting any time, he put on his detective hat, which was really just a small bucket he found in the backyard, and set off on his daring adventure. Captain Whiskers made his way to the bakery, tail held high, ready for action. As he entered the bakery, the smell of freshly baked goodies filled his nose. Mrs. Jenkins greeted him warmly. "Oh, Captain Whiskers, how can I help you today?" she asked while kneading dough. Captain Whiskers sat upright, puffing out his chest with determination. "Fear not, dear Mrs. Jenkins, for I shall solve the mystery of your missing secret ingredient. May I have access to your kitchen?" Amused by the brave little cat, Mrs. Jenkins obliged and led him to the kitchen. There, Captain Whiskers inspected every nook and cranny, sniffing and studying every ingredient. Just when he was about to give up, he noticed a tiny mouse hole near the pantry. Aha! Captain Whiskers had an inkling that the mischievous culprits might be mice who had a sweet tooth for secret ingredients. Brimming with excitement, he leaped into action, chasing the mice throughout the bakery. However, each time he got close, the mischievous critters escaped through a different mouse hole. Hours passed, and Captain Whiskers found himself in the most absurd situations. He accidentally knocked over a bag of flour, leaving a trail of white footprints all over the bakery. He slipped on a puddle of batter, sliding across the floor and crashing into a shelf of freshly baked pies. Pies flew everywhere, covering the bakery in a sticky mess. Through it all, Captain Whiskers remained determined and persistent, refusing to give up. Finally, the mice made a mistake and led him into a hidden room behind the bakery. To his astonishment, Captain Whiskers discovered that the mice were not thieves but inventors, trying to make their very own secret ingredient for Mrs. Jenkins' apple pie. Laughing heartily, Captain Whiskers praised the inventive spirit of the mice but reminded them of the importance of honesty. Together, they concocted a new recipe for the secret ingredient, combining their creative minds and culinary skills. Mrs. Jenkins, delighted by the unexpected turn of events, thanked Captain Whiskers and offered him a lifetime supply of apple pies. But instead, Captain Whiskers humbly requested that the endearing mice become official taste testers at the bakery. From that day forward, every pie created in Maryville was met with the expert opinion of the mice. And so, Captain Whiskers became a beloved hero in Maryville, known for his brave and humorous misadventures. Every time he walked down the street, he would hear endless laughter and receive warm smiles from every age group. reminding him how important it is to bring joy and laughter to the lives of others. And thus, our long funny story ends, leaving behind a legacy of friendship, creativity, and the tastiest pies in all of Maryville. The Hilarious Misadventures of Professor Pippin. Once upon a time, in the quirky town of Mirthville, there lived a peculiar professor named Professor Pippin. Professor Pippin was a renowned inventor, though his inventions often ended up causing more chaos than anything else. One sunny morning, Professor Pippin woke up feeling inspired. He had an idea that he just knew would revolutionize breakfast time. He set to work in his cluttered lab, mixing potions and tinkering with machines. After several hours of trial and error, he proudly presented his latest creation, a breakfast-making robot named Toastinator. Professor Pippin gleefully invited his neighbor, Mrs. McButter, over for a demonstration. As Mrs. McButter nervously sat at the dining table, Professor Pippin activated the Toastinator. However, instead of neatly toasting bread, the robot went haywire, flinging slices across the room like frisbees. Amidst the flying bread, Professor Pippin desperately tried to shut down the robot, but accidentally spilled a canister of maple syrup onto the control panel. The syrup-drenched control panel caused Toastinator to malfunction even further, now spraying pancake batter all over the walls. Mrs. McButter burst into laughter, unable to control herself. Professor Pippin couldn't help but chuckle too, realizing the absurdity of the situation. Together, they spent the entire morning dodging toast and pancake projectiles, laughing until their sides hurt. Soon, news of Professor Pippin's breakfast calamity spread throughout Mirthville. The townsfolk were accustomed to the professor's eccentricities, and they eagerly awaited what he would come up with next. Undeterred by the Toastinator incident, Professor Pippin's next invention aimed to revolutionize transportation. He created a levitating bicycle called the flycycle. Excitedly, he strapped on a helmet and took it for a test ride around town. The townspeople gathered at every corner to watch. As Professor Pippin prepared to demonstrate the flycycle's levitation capabilities, he pressed a button that he thought would activate the propellers. Instead, the flycycle catapulted him into the sky, leaving everyone below staring in awe as he soared across the horizon. Hours passed, and Professor Pippin tried everything to get back down. He tinkered with buttons, pulled levers, and even attempted to flap his arms like a bird. Finally, a group of children came up with a plan. They formed a human ladder, standing on top of each other's shoulders until they reached the floating professor. With a bit of clever maneuvering, they managed to bring him safely back to the ground. Once again, Mirthville erupted with laughter, seeing Professor Pippin dangling from the children's tower. Professor Pippin, still wearing his helmet, couldn't help but join in the merriment. From that day forward, Professor Pippin's misadventures became legendary in Mirthville. People eagerly anticipated his inventions, not only for their potential usefulness, but also for the laughter they brought to the town. Professor Pippin learned to embrace his unpredictable nature. He continued inventing with reckless abandon, always ready to laugh at himself when things went awry. And the people of Mirthville, young and old alike, cherished his eccentricities, appreciating the joy he brought to their lives. And so, the hilarious misadventures of Professor Pippin continued, creating laughter and memories that would be passed down through generations in the quaint town of Mirthville. The Misadventures of the Magical Muffins. Once upon a time, in the small town of Whiskerville, there lived a talented baker named Mr. Sprinkle. He had a magical touch when it came to creating extraordinary muffins that delighted everyone who tasted them. These muffins had a special ability: they could grant wishes. However, there was one thing that Mr. Sprinkle didn't know about his magical muffins: they had a mischievous side. One sunny morning, Mr. Sprinkle decided to bake a batch of muffins as a surprise for the whole town. He mixed the ingredients with care, adding a pinch of enchantment and a sprinkle of laughter. As the muffins baked in the oven, a peculiar spell started to take effect. Little did Mr. Sprinkle know, these muffins were about to change the lives of everyone in Whiskerville forever. As the aroma of freshly baked muffins filled the air, the townsfolk couldn't resist flocking to Mr. Sprinkle's bakery. One by one, they took a bite of the mysterious muffins, unaware of the magical powers contained within. And just like that, their wishes started coming true. Mrs. Butterwhip wished for a day without chores, and suddenly all her laundry folded itself while she sipped tea in the garden. Mr. Whiskers, the local cat, wished for a lifetime supply of fish, and an endless supply of sardines materialized on his doorstep. Even Mayor Meringue, known for his love of shiny things, found himself surrounded by piles of gold coins. But it wasn't long before chaos ensued. As the muffins granted wishes left and right, the once peaceful town turned into a whirlwind of outrageous requests. Children wished for candy, and suddenly the streets were flooded with chocolate rivers. Elderly folks wished for eternal youth and soon found themselves with wrinkled noses and pigtails. As the chaos grew, Mr. Sprinkle realized he had to find a way to control the magic of these muffins. He called upon his trusted friend, the wise old owl, Professor Hooty, for help. After studying the magical muffins, Professor Hooty discovered the secret behind their mischievous behavior: excessive laughter. Seeking a solution, Mr. Sprinkle and Professor Hooty decided to organize a grand comedy show at the town square. They invited everyone to come and enjoy a day filled with laughter. Performers from all over Whiskerville showcased their talents, causing even the grumpiest of citizens to burst into fits of laughter. With the town in stitches, Mr. Sprinkle handed out regular, non-magical muffins to replace the enchanted ones. As the townspeople munched on the new muffins, the magical effects slowly wore off, granting final, more manageable wishes. Eventually, things returned to normal. But the memories of that hilarious day would never be forgotten. From then on, Mr. Sprinkle continued to bake his delicious muffins, but this time without the added sprinkle of magic. The people of Whiskerville appreciated their laughter-filled misadventure and cherished the unforgettable lesson about the importance of balance. And so, the magical muffins of Whiskerville became a legend, passed down through generations, reminding everyone that sometimes, even in the midst of chaos and unexpected challenges, laughter is truly the best ingredient in life. The Misadventures of Grandpa Gus. Once upon a time, in a small town called Marydale, there lived a mischievous old man named Grandpa Gus. He had a heart as playful as a child's and a sense of humor that could brighten any room. Grandpa Gus loved nothing more than entertaining his grandchildren with his hilarious tales and colorful adventures. One sunny morning, Grandpa Gus decided it was time to embark on a quest to find the legendary golden pancake. Legend had it that this magical pancake had the power to grant eternal laughter. All the townsfolk chuckled at his crazy idea, but that didn't deter Grandpa Gus. With a twinkle in his eye and a pancake-shaped hat on his head, he set off on his grand adventure. As Grandpa Gus ventured through forests, climbed mountains, and crossed rivers, he encountered peculiar characters who joined him on his journey. There was Silly Sally, a giggling girl who could make even the grumpiest of beings crack a smile. Then came Wacky Willie, a clumsy but lovable fellow who insisted on wearing mismatched socks. Last, but not least, there was Laughing Larry, a jolly acrobat whose belly laughs were contagious. Together, the quartet stumbled upon challenges that tested their resolve, but Grandpa Gus always found a way to keep things lighthearted. In one instance, they encountered a grumpy troll guarding a bridge. Instead of fighting, Grandpa Gus challenged the troll to a tickle war. With feathers and tickles, laughter echoed across the bridge until the troll burst into a fit of giggles, allowing them to pass. Their laughter-filled journey took them to strange lands, including a village inhabited by funny-faced circus performers and a town where everyone spoke only in riddles. Grandpa Gus' companions couldn't help but be infected by his joyful spirit. The golden pancake seemed closer than ever. Finally, after countless guffaws and side-splitting moments, Grandpa Gus and his team stumbled upon a hidden grove deep in the heart of Marydale. There, resting on a silver platter, shimmered the golden pancake. The moment he took a single bite, laughter erupted from deep within everyone's hearts. Their gleeful chuckles filled the air. And even the birds couldn't help but join in the merriment. As the laughter settled, Grandpa Gus knew that it wasn't just the pancake that had brought them joy. It was the bond they had forged through their adventures and the shared moments of laughter. The golden pancake was simply a catalyst for happiness. Returning to Marydale, Grandpa Gus and his companions spread their newfound laughter throughout the town. The once serious townsfolk were transformed into a group of lively, joyful individuals. Laughter became the soundtrack of Marydale's daily life, thanks to the misadventures of Grandpa Gus. And so, the legend of the golden pancake lived on, reminding everyone that laughter is the true treasure in life. As for Grandpa Gus, he continued to bring joy to the world with his playful spirit, leaving an everlasting smile on the faces of all ages who crossed his path. The unruly zoo escape. Once upon a time, in the heart of the bustling city, there was an extraordinary zoo unlike any other. This zoo housed an array of mischievous animals who were known for their hilarious antics. People from all ages flocked to witness the spectacle and laugh themselves silly. In this whimsical zoo, there resided a cheeky elephant named Edward, a mischievous monkey named Marvin, a clumsy lion named Larry, and a snappy parrot named Polly. Each animal had its distinctive personality, which never failed to entertain visitors. One sunny day, as the zookeeper was trying to teach Edward some new tricks, Marvin decided it was the perfect time to prank his dear pachyderm friend. With nimble fingers, Marvin managed to snatch the training whistle from the zookeeper unnoticed. When the zookeeper commanded Edward to perform an impressive somersault, instead of obeying, Edward let out a loud trumpet from his trunk, startling everyone around. The visitors exploded with laughter. And the other animals started giggling too. Soon Larry, who always took himself far too seriously, couldn't resist joining in on the fun. He attempted his best impression of a synchronized gymnast but ended up clumsily tumbling onto Polly's perch. Polly, undeterred by the unexpected visitor, quickly adapted and playfully imitated Larry's roars. Their jovial exchange turned into a raucous rendition of "Who's the King of the Jungle Now?" The crowd roared with laughter as Polly pretended to lead the pride while Larry perched awkwardly on an imaginary branch. Meanwhile, Marvin, pleased with his successful prank, continued to cause mayhem. He skillfully imitated the zookeeper's voice, ordering Edward to let the other animals free. The unsuspecting elephant lumbered over to the cages, releasing everyone one by one. Chaos ensued as the animals raced around the zoo, spreading laughter and joy. The kangaroos hopped from one enclosure to another, the flamingos waddled with exaggerated elegance, and even the turtles scurried faster than ever before. The visitors were enthralled, cheering and clapping along. Finally, in the midst of the uproar, the zookeeper caught sight of the impish monkey perched on a tall tree. With a knowing smile, he decided to go along with the merriment. He playfully whistled Edward's favorite tune, capturing Marvin's attention. Unable to resist, Marvin swung down from the tree and landed right into the zookeeper's awaiting arms. The visitors erupted with applause and laughter, relieved that the chaos had come to an end. The animals returned to their enclosures, exhausted but exhilarated. From that day forward, the story of the unruly zoo escape became legendary, etching smiles on the faces of all ages who visited the zoo. And so, the extraordinary zoo continued to thrive as the laughter of children, parents, and grandparents echoed through its lively grounds, reminding everyone that a little mischief and plenty of laughter can brighten even the dullest of days. The Silly Sock Adventure. Once upon a time, in the whimsical town of Socksville, there lived a charming pair of socks named Sam and Sally. They were no ordinary socks, for they had colorful stripes and the ability to wiggle their toes with joy. Together, they embarked on a hilariously funny adventure that would bring laughter to all ages. On a bright sunny morning, as Sam and Sally were relaxing in their drawer, they overheard a conversation between the socks nearby. A sock named Kevin was telling an exciting tale about an abandoned laundry basket and the treasures it held. Eager for an adventure, Sam and Sally decided to explore. They hopped out of the drawer and onto the floor, rolling towards the laundry room. Along the way, they encountered various other socks, each with unique personalities. There was Bob, a sock with a constant case of the hiccups, and Molly, a shy sock who only peeked out from under the bed covers when the lights were off. Together, they formed the Sock Squad. With the guidance of Bob, the Sock Squad finally arrived at the laundry room. The abandoned laundry basket stood tall and mysterious, beckoning them with its untold secrets. Sam bravely went first, diving headfirst into the pile of laundry, followed closely by Sally, Bob, and Molly. The laundry pile turned out to be a wild ride. Sam found himself tumbling with mismatched socks, while Sally got entangled with a pair of long johns. Bob's hiccups intensified with every twist and turn, causing him to hop around uncontrollably. Molly, on the other hand, discovered her inner daredevil, performing acrobatic stunts over piles of towels. After countless tumbles, giggles, and even a close encounter with a feisty lint ball, the Sock Squad finally emerged from the laundry pile, covered in soapy bubbles and laughter. They had found no treasures but realized that the true treasure was the unforgettable adventure they had shared. As Sam, Sally, Bob, and Molly returned to the drawer, their friends gathered around, eager to hear their tale. The socks listened in awe, chuckling at every twist and turn of the story. From that day forward, the town of Socksville was filled with joyous laughter, as everyone cherished the importance of friendship, fun, and embracing silly adventures. And so, the legend of the Silly Sock Adventure lived on, bringing smiles and giggles to all who heard it, reminding them to always find the humor in life's little moments. The end. The Misadventures of Uncle Fred. Once upon a time in the quaint little town of Meadowbrook, there lived an eccentric man named Uncle Fred. He was known for his wild imagination, contagious laughter, and a perpetual twinkle in his eyes that seemed to hint at mischievous secrets. Uncle Fred could effortlessly capture the attention of anyone, regardless of their age, with his long, funny tales. One sunny afternoon, as children gathered around him in the park, Uncle Fred began weaving a story about a magical talking squirrel named Nutkin. He animatedly described Nutkin's hilarious escapades, from stealing acorns from grumpy old Mr. Johnson's garden to disguising himself as a superhero to fight off birds that threatened his tree. As Uncle Fred embellished the story with outrageous twists, the children laughed uproariously, hanging on to every word. The following day, Uncle Fred's misadventures took a comical turn when he decided to pursue his hidden passion for cooking. Armed with a ridiculous chef's hat and a mismatched apron, he ventured into the kitchen, ready to conquer the culinary world, or so he thought. As he clumsily eyed the ingredients, confusion set in. Uncle Fred mistook sugar for salt, baking powder for flour, and even added mustard to a cake instead of vanilla essence. When the cake finally emerged from the oven, it resembled a lumpy brown monstrosity. Nevertheless, Uncle Fred proudly declared it his latest masterpiece. Friends and family politely accepted a slice, trying their best to hide their horrified expressions. However, one brave soul couldn't contain his laughter, causing a chain reaction of uncontrollable giggles that quickly filled the room. Undeterred by his kitchen fiasco, Uncle Fred happened upon another opportunity for adventure. The local circus had arrived in Meadowbrook, and Uncle Fred, ever the daredevil, volunteered to be part of the show. The audience eagerly watched as he clumsily attempted to walk the tightrope, wobbling left and right. With each precarious step, gasps of anticipation mixed with gales of laughter echoed throughout the circus tent. As Uncle Fred's performance reached its grand finale, he got entangled in a juggling act, causing a cascade of balls to bounce unpredictably around the ring. He was chased by clowns, stumbled over his own feet, and even found himself momentarily trapped inside an oversized cannon. The entire circus erupted into applause at Uncle Fred's unintentional acrobatics. leaving him feeling like the true star of the show. Through his mishaps and adventures, Uncle Fred showed the importance of embracing imperfections, finding joy in laughter, and never taking oneself too seriously. His stories became a cherished tradition in Meadowbrook, bringing the community together and reminding everyone that life, no matter how unpredictable, is always better when shared with a little humor. And so, Uncle Fred continued to entertain, ensuring that his stories would be passed down from generation to generation, forever preserving the memory of a man whose laughter touched the hearts of all ages in Meadowbrook. The Great Mix-Up at Mr. Tickleton's Bakery. Once upon a time, in the charming town of Sugarville, there stood a bakery called Mr. Tickleton's. Now, Mr. Tickleton was known for his delectable pastries, each one crafted with love and care. However, there was one tiny problem: Mr. Tickleton had a terrible habit of mixing up his ingredients. One sunny morning, the bustling bakery was filled with laughter and chatter as the townsfolk eagerly lined up to get their hands on Mr. Tickleton's famous cinnamon rolls. Susan, a cheerful young girl with pigtails, was first in line. She was an avid fan of Mr. Tickleton's pastries and couldn't wait to taste his latest creations. As Susan approached the counter, Mr. Tickleton's hands were a blur, grabbing ingredients and tossing them into a large mixing bowl with abandon. Flour, sugar, vanilla extract, and, was that a pinch of salt or a sprinkle of cocoa? No one could quite tell. "Good morning, Mr. Tickleton." Susan greeted him with a smile. "Goodness me! Is it morning already?" Mr. Tickleton replied, startled. "Let's see, where did I put my recipe book?" Susan noticed a small book peeping out from beneath a mound of flour. "Is this what you're looking for, Mr. Tickleton?" she asked, holding it up. "Ah, yes. Thank you, Susan," Mr. Tickleton exclaimed, taking the book and promptly flipping it open. "Now, let's see. Cinnamon rolls. Cinnamon rolls. Ah. Here we are." With a flourish, Mr. Tickleton began selecting ingredients from a cluttered array of jars and cans. However, his hands moved so quickly that he accidentally threw in a handful of peanuts instead of walnuts, and a dash of paprika instead of cinnamon. Unaware of the comical mix-up, Mr. Tickleton continued on, kneading the dough with enthusiasm. The sweet scent of cinnamon quickly turned into an odd savory aroma, filling the bakery with an unexpected twist. As the dough rose in the oven, Susan's excitement grew stronger. She had always loved surprises, and today she was about to experience one like none other. Finally, the cinnamon rolls were out of the oven and ready to be served. Mr. Tickleton handed them to Susan with a flourish, unaware of his hilarious ingredient swap. Susan took a bite, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mr. Tickleton, these cinnamon rolls taste interesting." "Interesting? Why, thank you, my dear," Mr. Tickleton replied, beaming proudly. Susie giggled. "I taste peanuts and some warmth from the paprika." The townsfolk started lining up outside the bakery to try these interesting cinnamon rolls. Each person had a different reaction, from bursts of laughter to puzzled expressions. The bakery became the talk of Sugarville as people eagerly shared their unique experiences. Word spread to neighboring towns, and soon visitors from afar flocked to Mr. Tickleton's bakery, drawn by the promise of an unforgettable culinary adventure. The bakery became a hub of laughter and delight, where people embraced the unexpected flavors and cherished the memories created by Mr. Tickleton's happy accidents. And so, Mr. Tickleton's famous bakery thrived, not because of meticulous planning, but because of the joy he brought to everyone's lives through his unintentionally funny mishaps. From that day forward, Sugarville and beyond knew that a visit to Mr. Tickleton's bakery was never just a treat for the taste buds, but an experience filled with laughter and surprises that would warm hearts for years to come. So, dear friends, if you ever find yourself in Sugarville, don't forget to drop by Mr. Tickleton's bakery. You never know what delightful mix-up awaits your taste buds. The Misadventures of Professor Jollybottom. Once upon a time in the bustling town of Marymore, there lived a peculiar yet lovable man named Professor Jollybottom. With his unruly mop of bright orange hair, round spectacles perched on his nose, and a perpetual smile plastered on his face, he was always the source of laughter and joy for all those around him. The professor's days were filled with bizarre experiments and wacky inventions. From creating a flying bicycle made out of rubber bands and paper clips to concocting a potion that turned ordinary mice into disco-dancing maestros, there was never a dull moment in his laboratory. One cool autumn morning, Professor Jollybottom gathered all the children from Marymore for a grand spectacle. With his trusty assistant, Snickerdoodle the mischievous monkey, perched on his shoulder, he unveiled his latest invention, a gigantic bubble-making machine. As the children gathered around in anticipation, the professor pulled a lever, and the machine sprang to life. Out came a myriad of colorful bubbles that danced in the air, sparkling in the sunlight. The joy on the children's faces was immeasurable as they leaped and giggled, trying to catch the floating spheres. However, the professor's machine had a secret ingredient, a pinch of silliness. Unbeknownst to him, that morning a playful gust of wind had blown a jar of giggles into the concoction. As a result, the bubbles not only floated but also played tricks on anyone who dared pop them. One by one, the children began bursting the bubbles, only to be met with an unexpected surprise. Instead of disappearing, the bubbles transformed into confetti that showered upon them, turning their hair into rainbow-colored mohawks and painting their noses bright blue. Laughter echoed throughout Marymore as the once bashful townsfolk joined in on the festivities. The mayor, known for his stern demeanor, found himself with polka-dotted pants. The local baker saw his donuts pirouetting out of his shop, leaving trails of cinnamon behind them. And even the town's grumpy cat, Mr. Whiskers, found himself chasing his own tail while wearing a tiny top hat. Professor Jollybottom, unaware of the chaos his invention had caused, watched in amazement as the entire town became a whirlwind of colors and laughter. He soon realized that his bubbles had taken a mischievous turn, but rather than panic, he embraced the moment with open arms. Together with the help of the townsfolk, the professor and his trusty assistant set out on a mission to restore order. With Snickerdoodle's clever antics and the professor's endless supply of laughter, they devised a plan to capture all the bubbles and return Marymore to its normal state. Throughout their escapades, Professor Jollybottom taught the importance of humor and acceptance, reminding everyone that laughter is truly the best medicine. The townsfolk, young and old alike, discovered the power of unity and the beauty of finding joy in unexpected places. In the end, Marymore became even merrier than before. The townsfolk held an annual festival in honor of the professor, with colorful decorations, silly games, and, of course, lots of bubbles that brought endless laughter to all. And so, the legend of Professor Jollybottom and his misadventures continues to be passed down through the generations, reminding us to embrace the whimsical and find laughter in every step of our journey. The Great Sock Adventure. Once upon a time in a cozy little town called Sockville, there lived a mischievous sock named Sammy. Sammy wasn't like any other sock. He had an insatiable thirst for adventure and a knack for getting into hilarious situations. One sunny morning, Sammy was sitting in his drawer, feeling restless. He gazed out the window and saw a group of socks playing outside, their laughter echoing through the streets. Unable to resist the allure of fun, Sammy hopped out of the drawer and joined them. The playful socks invented a game called sock tag, where they had to chase each other and touch the tag on their backs to win. Sammy, being the nimble little sock that he was, soon became the undefeated champion. As the game progressed, Sammy realized that his friends had become tired and needed a break. Searching for something new to entertain them, Sammy noticed a flyer advertising a magic show happening in town that very evening. Excitedly, he gathered his fellow socks, and they set off to see the show. The magician, a peculiar character called Wizzy Wizard, had a talent for making objects disappear and reappear in mysterious ways. As Sammy and his friends sat mesmerized in the audience, they couldn't help but wonder if the magician could make their lives more exciting too. After the show, Sammy approached Wizzy Wizard and asked if he could perform a special trick for the socks. Wizzy, delighted by the idea, agreed. He whispered a secret spell into Sammy's fabric and transformed him into a flying sock. Sammy soared through the air, with his friends cheering and laughing below. They flew over the town, waving to everyone they passed. People stared in awe as socks filled the sky, an extraordinary sight that had never been seen before. The adventure took an unexpected turn when a gust of wind blew Sammy off course, separating him from the other socks. He landed in the backyard of a grumpy old man named Mr. Jenkins. Startled by Sammy's arrival, Mr. Jenkins tried to catch the flying sock with a net, but Sammy was too agile. With his mischievous nature guiding him, Sammy decided to have some fun with Mr. Jenkins. He zipped through the garden, knocking over flower pots, squirting water from the sprinklers, and making Mr. Jenkins chase him around in circles. Eventually, though, Sammy realized that despite his playful intentions, he had upset Mr. Jenkins. Feeling guilty, Sammy flew back to the old man, determined to make amends. He performed a flip right in front of him, causing Mr. Jenkins to burst into laughter. From that day forward, Sammy and Mr. Jenkins became unlikely friends. Sammy would visit Mr. Jenkins regularly, brightening his days with his cheerful antics. The pair became a familiar sight in Sockville, spreading joy wherever they went. And so, the legend of Sammy, the flying sock, and Mr. Jenkins, the grumpy man turned jolly, lived on in the hearts of the people of Sockville. Their story reminded everyone that even the most mismatched pairs could find friendship and laughter together, bringing smiles to all ages. The end. The Enchanted Taffy Factory. Once upon a time in the small town of Sugarsville, there stood a magical taffy factory. This was not just any ordinary factory, it was the Enchanted Taffy Factory. Owned by the kind-hearted Mr. Wally, the factory produced the most delightful and delicious taffies that brought smiles to everyone's faces. Every morning, Mr. Wally would greet his workers with a warm hug and a playful joke. He believed that laughter was the secret ingredient to making the tastiest taffies. The factory hummed with joy as workers spun the sticky mixture into long strands of colorful sweetness. From chocolate to strawberry, lemon to blueberry, there was a flavor for every taste bud in Sugarsville. One fine day, a mischievous gnome named Giggles decided to pay a visit to the Enchanted Taffy Factory. Giggles loved pranks and mischief, and he couldn't resist the thought of causing some hilarious chaos at the factory. As Giggles snuck into the factory, he sprinkled a handful of his special laughter dust over the taffy-making machines. Suddenly, a cloud of giggles filled the air, and everything started to go haywire. The taffy machines spun faster than ever before, splattering taffy all over the walls and floors. Mr. Wally appeared, his normally gentle eyes filled with concern. "What's happening?" he exclaimed, trying to keep his balance on the slippery taffy-covered floor. "We must fix this before anyone gets hurt." The workers, being kind-hearted and quick-thinking, joined forces with Mr. Wally to contain the wild taffy-making madness. They used comically large brooms to sweep up the runaway taffy, turning the cleanup into a dance routine that had everyone laughing. Meanwhile, Giggles looked on with glee, thinking his prank had worked perfectly. But little did he know that laughter was the factory's secret weapon. The more everyone laughed, the more the taffy machines settled down and returned to their usual pace. As Giggles watched the workers effortlessly turn a chaotic situation into a hilarious spectacle, he couldn't help but chuckle. He realized that his pranks were meant to bring laughter, not chaos. Overcome with remorse, Giggles decided to lend a hand. With his magical powers, Giggles transformed into a friendly blue gnome and introduced himself to Mr. Wally and the workers. He apologized for his prank and offered to use his laughter dust for good instead. Mr. Wally, being the kind-hearted soul that he was, accepted Giggles' apology and welcomed him into the enchanted taffy factory family. From that day forward, Giggles became the official factory jester, bringing endless laughter and joy to both workers and visitors alike. The enchanted taffy factory continued to be a place of wonder, where laughter and kindness always prevailed. And so, the people of Sugarsville, young and old, lined up outside the enchanted taffy factory, ready to taste the magical taffies made with love and laughter. For in this whimsical world, where taffy danced and giggles abounded, happiness was not just a feeling, it was a truly delicious treat for all ages. The Misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in a small, quaint town lived a mischievous cat named Mr. Whiskers. With his fluffy fur and twinkling green eyes, he was adored by everyone. Mr. Whiskers had a unique talent. He could understand human language, but not speak it. This led to some hilarious encounters that often left people scratching their heads. One sunny day, as Mr. Whiskers roamed the streets, he overheard a conversation between two friends, Jenny and Timmy. They were planning a surprise birthday party for their grandmother, Mrs. Jenkins. Giddy with excitement, they discussed various decorations and games, unaware that Mr. Whiskers was listening attentively. Intrigued by the idea of a party, Mr. Whiskers decided to lend a helping paw. He began by visiting the local grocery store, sneaking into baskets to collect colorful balloons and streamers. Every time he accidentally popped a balloon, startled shoppers would crack up with laughter. Next, Mr. Whiskers stumbled upon a craft store, where he found a treasure trove of supplies. With his nimble paws, he skillfully picked out a selection of sparkly confetti, silly hats, and even managed to glue fake mustaches to his furry face. People passing by couldn't help but chuckle at Mr. Whiskers' adorable disguise. As Mr. Whiskers made his way to Mrs. Jenkins' home, his excitement grew. He discovered an open window and gracefully slipped inside, setting about transforming the living room into a carnival wonderland. He hung the decorations, set up games with prizes, and even baked a cake using a recipe he found online. Just as Mr. Whiskers was putting finishing touches on the cake, Jenny and Timmy arrived at their grandmother's house, completely astounded by the sight before them. "Grandma Jenkins will love this," cried Timmy, while Jenny marveled at how everything came together so perfectly. Little did they know, their feline friend was the secret behind their amazing surprise. As the party began, Mr. Whiskers reveled in the joy filling the room. Children giggled as they played games, adults laughed until their sides hurt, and Mrs. Jenkins beamed with delight. Mr. Whiskers, too, joined in the celebration, batting around balloons and chasing confetti with pure feline glee. Days turned into weeks, and the townsfolk showered Mr. Whiskers with gratitude and love. It seemed that everyone wanted him to assist in their celebrations. Birthday parties, anniversaries, and even impromptu gatherings became opportunities for Mr. Whiskers to showcase his hidden talent. And so, the funny and heartwarming adventures of Mr. Whiskers continued, bringing laughter and joy to all ages. His mischievous acts taught the townsfolk the true meaning of friendship and reminded them to appreciate the little moments in life. As for Mr. Whiskers, he relished in being the honorary party planner, knowing that his furry presence could brighten anyone's day with a sprinkle of humor and a touch of whiskered charm. The Misadventures of Mayor Mischief. Once upon a time in the bustling town of Pleasantville, there lived a mayor named Mayor Mischief. Mayor Mischief was well known for his mischievous and playful nature, always finding ways to bring smiles to the faces of the townspeople. One sunny morning, Mayor Mischief woke up to a curious sight outside his window. It seemed that overnight, the trees surrounding his house had sprouted brightly colored balloons instead of leaves. Chuckling at this peculiar prank, he decided to embrace it and threw open his window, allowing the breeze to carry him away. Floating through the sky, tied to the balloons, Mayor Mischief giggled with delight as he hovered above the town. As the townspeople gathered below, staring in amazement, Mayor Mischief decided to have some more fun. He began to shower them with confetti and glitter, creating an impromptu parade right there in the streets of Pleasantville. Children laughed and danced, adults joined in, and even the usually grumpy cat named Mr. Whiskers couldn't resist tapping his paws to the festive rhythm. Unbeknownst to Mayor Mischief, one of his colorful balloons had broken free, causing him to descend rapidly towards the ground. As he floated down, he noticed a little girl named Lily, tears streaming down her face. She had lost her favorite toy, Mr. Binky, in the nearby park. Touched by her sadness, Mayor Mischief knew he had to help. Using his mischievous wit, Mayor Mischief came up with a plan. He gathered all the townspeople and divided them into teams, equipped with feather dusters, magnifying glasses, and silly hats. Together, they embarked on a comical search for Mr. Binky. They scoured every inch of the town, turning it upside down in their quest. Along the way, they encountered many obstacles and hilarious mishaps. They mistook a garden gnome for Mr. Binky, only to realize it wasn't wearing a polka-dotted bow tie like Lily had described. They even got tangled in a clothesline while chasing after a runaway squirrel who had mistaken Mr. Binky for an acorn. After hours of searching, Mayor Mischief's team discovered Mr. Binky hidden inside a popcorn stand at the local park. Overwhelmed with joy, Lily ran towards Mayor Mischief, wrapping him in a tight hug. The townspeople erupted into cheers, applauding Mayor Mischief's determination and silliness. From that day forward, Mayor Mischief became a beloved figure in Pleasantville, organizing fun and entertaining events for all ages. Whether it was hosting a giant pillow fight or organizing an annual pie-eating contest, he never failed to bring laughter and joy to the town. And so, the misadventures of Mayor Mischief continued, each day filled with laughter, camaraderie, and the undying belief that a touch of mischief could brighten even the darkest moments. And so, the delightful tale of Pleasantville's beloved Mayor Mischief spread far and wide, inspiring everyone to embrace their inner child and find joy in life's little surprises. The wacky adventures of Professor Quirklington. Once upon a time, in the whimsical town of Mirthville, there lived a peculiar fellow named Professor Quirklington. He was known far and wide for his eccentricity, his wildly unkempt hair, and his constant mishaps. Despite his many blunders, the townspeople adored him for his good-hearted nature and unrelenting sense of humor. One sunny morning, as Professor Quirklington strolled through the town square, he spotted a colorful poster pinned on a tree. It announced a talent show, promising laughter and merriment for all ages. Excitement bubbled within the professor, and he hurried back to his laboratory to prepare a truly unforgettable act. Days flew by, and the day of the talent show arrived. The entire town gathered at the grand stage, eagerly awaiting the performances. Professor Quirklington, true to his nature, had crafted a contraption that would catapult him high into the air, performing somersaults and other acrobatics before landing gracefully on a giant inflatable donut. As the professor prepared for his act, wearing a cape adorned with polka dots and a hat that seemed to defy gravity, his loyal assistant, Miss Fizzlepop, scurried around, ensuring everything was in order. She adjusted the contraption, checking each bolt and screw with utmost care. Finally, the moment came. Professor Quirklington stood atop the contraption, ready to be launched into the sky. With a resounding 3, 2, 1, the machine sprang to life, propelling the professor higher and higher. But disaster struck. The contraption malfunctioned mid-air, sending the professor spiraling out of control. The audience gasped, worried for their beloved professor's safety. However, they soon realized that something hilarious was afoot. With each somersault, the professor's cape became entangled in the machine, transforming him into a makeshift human kite. Through the air, he soared, his laughter mingling with the uproarious laughter of the entire town. The professor looped and twirled, his zany acrobatics captivating the audience, turning their initial concern into sheer amusement. Then, as if by magic, the contraption released the professor, and he floated gently down towards the ground. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Their faces red with laughter and their spirits lifted. Professor Corklington, now covered in grass stains and twigs, bowed deeply, his eyes twinkling with joy. He had unintentionally created the most unforgettable act of the evening. The townspeople heaved with laughter, grateful for the professor's accidental hilarity. And so, from that day forward, Professor Corklington's name became synonymous with laughter and good-natured fun. Whether it was launching himself into the sky or inventing new ways to make everyone smile, the professor's wacky adventures continued to bring joy to the town of Mirthville, reminding them all that life's quirks and mishaps are often the very things that make it worth living. The end. The Unconventional Zoo. Once upon a time, in a small town called Maryville, there was an adventurous boy named Oliver. Oliver had always dreamed of visiting a zoo, but unfortunately, there wasn't one in his town. Determined to bring the joy of a zoo to his fellow townsfolk, Oliver decided to create his very own zoo. Oliver went door to door, asking everyone if they had any unusual or exotic animals that he could borrow for the day. Soon enough, animals of all shapes and sizes started filling up Oliver's backyard. There were monkeys swinging from trees, a giraffe peeking over the fence, and even a mischievous penguin sliding on a makeshift ice rink. Word quickly spread about Oliver's unconventional zoo, and people from neighboring towns started flocking to Maryville to experience the unique zoo for themselves. Families with children, grandparents, and even teenagers eager to see something different made their way to Oliver's backyard. As the crowd grew bigger, Oliver knew he had to take charge and become the best zookeeper he could be. He wore a khaki hat, donned a whistle around his neck, and carried a notepad and pen in his back pocket. Oliver was ready. The first stop on the zoo tour was the Monkey Mansion. The monkeys were full of energy, swinging from branch to branch, and playfully tossing bananas at each other. Oliver, with his friendly and patient nature, taught the visitors a few monkey-friendly tricks, like how to scratch their own backs using long sticks. Next, it was time to visit the giraffe. With a ladder in hand, Oliver helped the visitors take turns feeding the tall and majestic creature. Laughter filled the air as the giraffe reached out with its long neck to snatch snacks, and occasionally stole a visitor's hat in the process. The highlight of the day was the penguin show. Oliver had transformed his backyard into a winter wonderland, complete with a shallow pool for the penguins to swim and slide. To everyone's surprise, the penguins were natural comedians, waddling around and performing their own version of a synchronized swimming routine. Kids and adults alike couldn't stop laughing at their antics. Oliver's unconventional zoo became the talk of the town and the region. People would come from miles away just to experience the joy and laughter it brought. Oliver continued to expand and improve his zoo, adding more animals and attractions over time. Years later, when Oliver grew older, the town of Maryville decided to build a proper zoo in his honor. It became a grand place, attracting millions of visitors from all over the world. Oliver had achieved his lifelong dream of bringing the joy of a zoo to his town, and he couldn't have been happier. And so, the little town of Maryville became famous for having the most unique and entertaining zoo in the world, all thanks to a young boy with a big dream and a backyard full of imagination. The end. The extraterrestrial silliness. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills, there lived a peculiar farmer named Henry. Henry was no ordinary farmer. He had an extraordinary obsession with outer space and all things extraterrestrial. His cottage was filled with posters of alien creatures, telescopes that reached the heavens, and even a life-sized cardboard cutout of a friendly green alien named Zog. One bright sunny morning, as Henry was tending to his cornfield, he spotted a mysterious object crash-landing into his pasture. Excitement rushed through his veins as he raced towards the smoking crater, imagining that it must surely be a spaceship from a far-off galaxy. He arrived with bated breath, eagerly expecting to greet his new alien visitors. To his great surprise, he discovered that the spaceship was nothing more than a large inflatable bounce house blown into his field by a strong gust of wind. Disappointed but undeterred, Henry decided to make the most of it. After all, what could be more fun than a giant bounce house plopped right into your backyard? Word of this newfound attraction quickly spread throughout the village. Children and adults alike flocked to Henry's farm, eager to experience the bouncing adventure that awaited them. Henry, with his unwavering dedication to silliness, made sure that everyone who visited had a whale of a time. From the moment the villagers stepped into the bounce house, they felt like they were weightless astronauts floating in space. They bounced higher and higher, giggling and laughing until their sides ached. Henry himself couldn't resist joining in on the fun, bouncing with such enthusiasm that he nearly touched the clouds. The laughter-filled days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. People traveled from neighboring towns just to experience the sheer joy that Henry's bounce house brought. It became a place where everyone, regardless of age, could let loose, forget their worries, and embrace the child within. But as summer turned into autumn, a strange thing began to happen. Henry noticed that those who had spent prolonged periods in the bounce house started exhibiting unusual behavior. They spoke in rhymes, walked on their hands instead of their feet, and even developed an uncontrollable urge to eat pancakes at midnight. Concerned about this unexpected twist, Henry sought advice from his trusted friend, Professor Bertram, a brilliant but eccentric scientist who lived on the outskirts of the village. Upon hearing about the peculiar symptoms, the professor laughed heartily and exclaimed, "My dear Henry, it seems you've unwittingly stumbled upon a parallel universe filled with zany energy. The bouncing has unleashed its effects on these unsuspecting folk." Together, Henry and Professor Bertram devised a plan to reverse the effects of the parallel universe. They used twirling whirligigs, banana peels, and a dash of cosmic glitter, building a contraption capable of channeling the zany energy back to where it came from. With the contraption in place, Henry invited all affected villagers for a final bouncing extravaganza. As they joyously bounced one last time, the contraption whirred and hummed with a mysterious power. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash, and the world around them returned to normal. The villagers emerged from the bounce house, their silly symptoms vanished. Yet with hearts brimming full of gratitude for the unforgettable experience. They praised Henry for his boundless imagination and thanked Professor Bertram for his scientific wizardry. From that day forward, the village celebrated an annual extraterrestrial silliness day, where laughter, whimsy, and bouncy adventures were cherished by all, young and old. And so, dear reader, remember to embrace your inner child, find delight in the absurd, and never underestimate the power of silliness, for it may just unlock a whole universe of laughter and joy. The Misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in the quaint town of Muddlebrook, there lived a mischievous and curious cat named Mr. Whiskers. He was known throughout the neighborhood for his playful antics and his love for adventure. One sunny morning, Mr. Whiskers woke up with an insatiable craving for fish. Unable to contain his excitement, he decided to embark on a journey to the local fish market. With his tail wagging in anticipation, he set off down the cobblestone streets, leaving a trail of questioning townsfolk behind. Mr. Whiskers scurried into the market, his eyes gleaming at the sight of the delectable fish on display. Now, it's worth mentioning that Mr. Whiskers had a sweet tooth for mischief as well. So, while the fishmonger was preoccupied, Mr. Whiskers managed to snatch a particularly large and slippery fish right under his nose. With his prize clenched between his teeth, Mr. Whiskers darted out of the market faster than a lightning bolt. The fishmonger, who noticed the commotion, didn't waste a second and began chasing Mr. Whiskers through the market square. Through a series of narrow alleyways and crowded streets, Mr. Whiskers led the fishmonger on a wild goose chase, or should we say, a wild fish chase. The townsfolk, amused by the spectacle, joined in the pursuit. Laughter filled the air as the sneaky cat skillfully evaded capture. As the chase continued, Mr. Whiskers found himself in Muddlebrook Park, where children were playing and enjoying picnics. Seeing a tree with low-hanging branches, he leaped up, fish still in jaws, and climbed higher and higher until he reached the very top. From his elevated perch, Mr. Whiskers surveyed the scene below. The fishmonger and the townsfolk were out of breath, unable to reach him. Meanwhile, the children had gathered beneath the tree, their eyes bright with curiosity. One brave little girl named Emily spoke up, "Mr. Whiskers, why did you steal that fish?" The mischievous cat tilted his head, as if pondering the question. He gently dropped the fish from the tree, causing a chorus of gasps from the crowd below. With a slight grin, Mr. Whiskers meowed. "I suppose I just couldn't resist the lure of adventure. But fear not, my dear friends, for I shall make it up to you all." And so, Mr. Whiskers spent the rest of the day entertaining the town with his hilarious acrobatics and charming tricks. The people of Muddlebrook laughed until their bellies hurt, forgetting all about the stolen fish. From that day forward, Mr. Whiskers became the beloved mascot of Muddlebrook, bringing joy and laughter wherever he went. And although his love for mischief remained, the naughty cat learned that sometimes it's the journey that matters more than the stolen fish. And so, the misadventures of Mr. Whiskers continued, leaving an everlasting smile on the faces of the young and old alike in the town of Muddlebrook. The end. The Misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in the quiet little town of Wobbleton, there lived a mischievous and curious cat named Mr. Whiskers. With his bright orange fur and mischievous green eyes, he was the talk of the town. Mr. Whiskers had a knack for getting into trouble, but he always managed to make everyone laugh along the way. One sunny morning, Mr. Whiskers found himself on an unexpected adventure. It all started when he noticed a group of birds chirping excitedly near the park. Curiosity getting the better of him, Mr. Whiskers decided to investigate. Little did he know, the birds were busy planning their annual talent show, and they needed a host. They saw Mr. Whiskers as the perfect candidate, with his charm, wit, and hilarious antics. When Mr. Whiskers stumbled upon their secret gathering, the birds wasted no time in recruiting him. Thrilled at the opportunity, Mr. Whiskers accepted the role of the talent show's host. However, hosting a talent show proved to be harder than he imagined. As the auditions began, Mr. Whiskers soon discovered that not all performers were as talented as they claimed. First up was Benny, the dog, who thought he could sing like a bird. His howling melodies echoed through the park, causing both laughter and confusion. But Mr. Whiskers, ever the patient assistant, encouraged Benny to keep going, much to the audience's amusement. Next, a group of squirrels, called the Nutty Acorns, took the stage. Their acrobatic routine was supposed to be graceful and awe-inspiring, but they ended up tumbling into each other, creating a chaotic mess of flying tails and falling nuts. The crowd roared with laughter, and Mr. Whiskers couldn't help but join them. As the auditions continued, each performer brought a new wave of laughter and joy. There was Hilda, the bunny, attempting to juggle watermelons twice her size, only to have them splatter all over her fur. There was Percy the parrot, whose memory failed every time he tried to remember his lines. Throughout it all, Mr. Whiskers remained calm and supportive, offering words of encouragement and making everyone feel at ease. The audience adored him, and his infectious laughter spread like wildfire. Finally, the day of the talent show arrived. The park was brimming with excited animals and humans alike, eager to see what Mr. Whiskers and his motley crew of performers had in store. As the show began, Mr. Whiskers stood proudly on the makeshift stage, all eyes fixed on him. One by one, the performers put on their acts. Despite all the mishaps and laughs, the show was a resounding success. Mr. Whiskers' gentle guidance and endless patience had turned what could have been a disaster into an unforgettable event. The townspeople praised him for bringing laughter and cheer to their lives. From that day forward, Mr. Whiskers became a beloved figure in Wobbleton. He continued to explore, find trouble, and bring joy wherever he went. The talent show became an annual tradition, with Mr. Whiskers as its esteemed host. And so, the misadventures of Mr. Whiskers continued, reminding everyone that sometimes the best way to brighten someone's day is with a good laugh. And so, the legend of Mr. Whiskers, the mischievous and lovable cat, lived on, providing entertainment and laughter for all ages in the town of Wobbleton. The misadventures of Professor Whiskers. Once upon a time in the small town of Bumbleberry, there lived a quirky but kind-hearted scientist named Professor Whiskers. With his frazzled white hair, round spectacles, and a lab coat covered in mysterious stains, he was always up to something strange and wonderful. One sunny morning, as Professor Whiskers was mixing potions in his cluttered laboratory, he accidentally knocked over a vial of purple liquid. It splashed onto a nearby frog, causing it to grow 10 times its original size. Startled, the professor chuckled nervously and muttered, "Well, that's not quite what I had in mind." Seeing the marvelous transformation, Professor Whiskers decided to create a potion that could make animals grow bigger. With a special twist, they would also gain the ability to speak. In his excitement, he called his trusted friend, Timothy the talking turtle, to assist him with this new experiment. Together, Professor Whiskers and Timothy set off on a hilarious adventure to gather the necessary ingredients for the potion. They ventured through dense jungles, treacherous mountains, and even braved a haunted cave infested with mischievous ghosts. Along the way, their mishaps and antics brought laughter to everyone they encountered. Once they collected all the ingredients, they returned to the laboratory to make the potion. Unbeknownst to them, their mischievous cat, Mr. Whiskers, sneaked into the lab and playfully knocked jars and bottles off the shelves, causing chaos. Professor Whiskers and Timothy worked tirelessly to clean up the mess while fending off Mr. Whiskers' attempts to grab the ingredients. Despite the setbacks, they managed to complete the potion just in time for the annual pet parade, where animals from all over would showcase their talents. Excitedly, Professor Whiskers sprinkled a few drops of the potion onto a group of animals, including Timothy and Mr. Whiskers. As the parade began, the animals started growing and talking, captivating the crowd with their newfound abilities. Timothy, now a giant talking turtle, recited poetry while balancing cups on his shell, much to the delight of the audience. Mr. Whiskers, having grown to an enormous size, danced clumsily alongside the procession, unintentionally causing giggles and cheers from all directions. However, as the parade reached its climax, a sudden drizzle poured down, washing away the effects of the potion. The animals shrank back to their original sizes, but the laughter and joy remained. The crowd roared with applause, grateful for the unforgettable spectacle that Professor Whiskers and his furry friends had provided. From that day forward, Professor Whiskers became a beloved figure in Bumbleberry, renowned for his eccentricity and ability to bring joy to others. His laboratory was always open for visitors, who eagerly awaited more of his whimsical experiments and incredible discoveries. And so, the misadventures of Professor Whiskers continued, leaving a trail of laughter and delight wherever he went, proving that sometimes life's most extraordinary moments can be found in the most unexpected places. The misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in the quaint town of Willowbrook, there lived a peculiar yet endearing orange tabby cat named Mr. Whiskers. Known for his mischievous antics and insatiable curiosity, Mr. Whiskers was loved by all the townsfolk, young and old alike. One sunny morning, as Mr. Whiskers sauntered through the neighborhood, he noticed a colorful tent set up at the town square. Unable to resist the temptation, he ventured inside to discover a traveling circus. The aroma of popcorn and cotton candy filled the air, enticing Mr. Whiskers even further. Inside the circus, Mr. Whiskers stumbled upon an array of performers preparing for their grand show. His eyes widened with excitement as he witnessed acrobats soaring through the air, clowns juggling balls, and a majestic lion tamer practicing her tricks. But amidst all the wonder, Mr. Whiskers caught sight of a group of mice nestled inside a cage. Feeling a surge of empathy, Mr. Whiskers devised a plan to set the mice free. He tiptoed towards the cage, reached out his paw, and gently unlatched the door. In an instant, the mice squeaked with joy as they scuttled away to find their newfound freedom. Unbeknownst to Mr. Whiskers, his act of kindness had not gone unnoticed. The circus owner, Mr. Barnaby, spotted the liberated mice and immediately suspected a feline culprit. With a stern expression on his face, Mr. Barnaby vowed to catch the miscreant responsible for the great mouse escape. Meanwhile, Mr. Whiskers, completely unaware of the chaos he had inadvertently caused, delighted in exploring the various circus attractions. He hopped on the trapeze swings, flung himself into a giant net, and even attempted to ride a unicycle, all to the amusement of the circus crew and the growing crowd. As Mr. Barnaby scoured the circus grounds, he caught a glimpse of a bushy orange tail disappearing behind a cart filled with colorful props. Determined to catch the culprit, Mr. Barnaby snuck up behind Mr. Whiskers and managed to grab hold of his tail. Startled, Mr. Whiskers let out a comical meow and took off running across the circus grounds, with Mr. Barnaby in hot pursuit. The chase led them through hoops, under tightropes, and past bemused circus performers who couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the scene. Finally, Mr. Whiskers found refuge atop a stack of barrels, just out of Mr. Barnaby's reach. Panting heavily, the two adversaries locked eyes, and in that moment, they realized that all of this chaos was merely a hilarious misunderstanding. With newfound understanding, Mr. Barnaby released Mr. Whiskers from his grasp, and they shared a chuckle amidst the uproar. Emboldened by the camaraderie, Mr. Barnaby gave Mr. Whiskers a tour of the circus, introducing him to the various performers and their talents. From that day on, Mr. Whiskers became an unofficial mascot of the circus, bringing joy to both young and old as he accompanied the performers during their acts. The townsfolk flocked to the circus night after night to witness the extraordinary spectacle, where laughter and mirth became the highlight of their lives. And so, with his wild escapades and heartwarming adventures, Mr. Whiskers taught everyone the importance of laughter, friendship, and how even the most peculiar of creatures can find their place in the world. The end. The hilarious hunt for the mischievous monkey. Once upon a time in a small village called Sunnydale, there lived a mischievous monkey named Momo. Momo was known throughout the village for his pranks and non-stop mischief. No one had been able to catch him, not even the village elder, who prided himself on being the most patient person in Sunnydale. One sunny day, the villagers gathered in the town square to discuss their dilemma. They were tired of Momo's antics and wanted to come up with a way to catch him once and for all. After hours of discussion, they hatched a plan. The villagers decided to enlist the help of the cleverest person they knew, Amelia, a young girl with a knack for solving puzzles and riddles. Amelia agreed to help and began brainstorming ideas. She remembered that monkeys loved shiny objects and decided to use that knowledge to their advantage. The next day, Amelia and the villagers set up a trap in the heart of the village. They placed a giant glass jar filled with colorful marbles in the middle of the square. The plan was to lure Momo into the jar by hanging shiny objects from nearby trees to catch his attention. As evening fell, the village was quiet, waiting for Momo to make his appearance. Suddenly, they heard rustling in the trees, and there he was, Momo, trying to reach a shiny necklace hanging from a branch. He leaped from tree to tree, determined to satisfy his curiosity. Amelia, dressed as a tourist, pretended to fawn over the marbles, exclaiming loudly about their beauty and rarity. As she continued to admire them, she shouted, "Oh, dear! I seem to have dropped my camera inside the jar. Can someone please help me retrieve it?" Momo, always curious, couldn't resist the temptation. He hopped down from the branches and approached the jar. The villagers held their breath, hoping their plan would work. Much to their delight, Momo jumped into the jar, attempting to fish out the imaginary camera. The villagers quickly sealed the jar shut. trapping the mischievous monkey inside. Amelia thanked the villagers for their assistance and reminded them that even though Momo had caused them trouble, they should treat him kindly. She suggested they create a spacious enclosure near the village where Momo could live happily, surrounded by his beloved shiny objects. From then on, Momo still brought laughter and joy to the villagers, but this time without causing chaos. Children would visit him regularly, bringing shiny trinkets to add to his collection. And so, it was in Sunnydale, where the mischievous monkey became a beloved part of the community, reminding everyone to find laughter in life's little surprises. The end. The Enchanted Sausage. Once upon a time, in the charming town of Bumbleberry, there lived a humble butcher named Mr. McTavish. Mr. McTavish was renowned for his succulent sausages, crafted with a secret recipe handed down through generations. Legend had it that consuming one of his enchanted sausages would grant the eater an unusual and hilarious ability. One sunny morning, young Tommy Tiddlywinks ventured into Mr. McTavish's shop. His curiosity piqued by the rumors, he decided to try one of the magical sausages. With a twinkle in his eye and a smirk on his face, he devoured it in one bite. To his astonishment, Tommy found himself transformed into a bouncing kangaroo. He hopped around the town, causing quite the commotion and leaving everyone in laughter. The townsfolk couldn't believe their eyes as they watched Tommy hop over fences and leap across rooftops, narrowly avoiding collisions at every turn. Word spread like wildfire, attracting visitors from far and wide who wished to experience the enchanting sausages themselves. There was the teacher who turned into a talking parrot and taught class from her perch. The baker transformed into a human muffin and startled customers as they tried to take a bite out of him. And the mayor, who turned invisible, caused quite a stir at an important town meeting. But the most memorable transformation was that of old Mrs. McGillicuddy, the town's grumpy old lady. After enjoying one of Mr. McTavish's sausages, she morphed into a singing mermaid whenever she came into contact with water. Whenever it rained, she'd be spotted splashing and belting out catchy tunes in the puddles, much to the delight of children and adults alike. As the demand for Mr. McTavish's sausages grew, so did the hilarity and chaos that ensued in Bumbleberry. People swapped abilities, transformed into animals, and even switched genders temporarily. It became a place where mischief and laughter were as common as the sunrise. One day, as Mr. McTavish was busy preparing a new batch of sausages, he received a visit from a mysterious man named Mr. Gigglesworth. Dressed in a vibrant suit covered with polka dots, Mr. Gigglesworth claimed to be a talent scout, searching for extraordinary artists. Intrigued, Mr. McTavish reluctantly agreed to reveal his secret recipe. But instead of using it for fame and fortune, Mr. Gigglesworth decided to throw a grand carnival in Bumbleberry, showcasing the enchanting abilities of its residents. The news spread like wildfire, attracting performers from all over. The town was adorned with colorful banners, vibrant tents, and incredible attractions. Acrobats defied gravity, clowns juggled fire, and the sky was filled with music from talented musicians. Mr. McTavish stood proudly at the entrance of his shop, watching the spectacle unfold. He saw the joy that his enchanted sausages brought to people's lives, the friendships formed through shared laughter, and the power of embracing one's uniqueness. And so, the town of Bumbleberry basked in the glory of their magical sausages, with happiness and laughter forever on the menu. The Misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in the bustling town of Cloverfield, there lived a mischievous yet lovable cat named Mr. Whiskers. With his striped coat and mischievous green eyes, Mr. Whiskers had captured the hearts of everyone in town. One bright sunny morning, Mr. Whiskers woke up feeling particularly mischievous. He decided it was time to embark on another grand adventure. As he strolled into the garden, he spotted a group of children playing a game of hide-and-seek. Mr. Whiskers, always eager for attention and laughter, decided to join in on the fun. He hid behind a large oak tree and waited for one of the children to find him. But as fate would have it, none of the children discovered his hiding place. Instead, Mrs. Jenkins, the sweet old lady who lived next door, stumbled upon him while searching for her missing gardening gloves. "Hello there, Mr. Whiskers. What mischief are you up to today?" Mrs. Jenkins asked with a chuckle. Mr. Whiskers purred and weaved between her legs, delighted by the unexpected company. Seeing an opportunity for more fun, he dashed towards the town square, with Mrs. Jenkins following close behind. As they reached the town square, they stumbled upon a puppet show being put on by the local theater group. Intrigued, Mr. Whiskers hopped onto the stage in the middle of the performance, causing the puppets to momentarily freeze in shock. The audience erupted into laughter at the sight of the mischievous feline stealing the limelight. The puppets, unable to resist Mr. Whiskers' charm, joined him in an impromptu dance routine, turning the puppet show into a whimsical, furry extravaganza. News of Mr. Whiskers' antics spread like wildfire throughout Cloverfield, attracting even more curious onlookers. People from all walks of life gathered to witness the extraordinary cat who had managed to bring joy and laughter to their community. The mayor of Cloverfield, recognizing the positive impact Mr. Whiskers had on the town, declared a special holiday in his honor. On Whiskers Day, residents filled the streets, wearing striped clothing, cat ears, and painted whiskers on their faces as a tribute to their beloved feline friend. Mr. Whiskers, basking in the adoration, reveled in the festivities. He spent the day exploring the town, receiving countless belly rubs, and indulging in a feast of his favorite treats. From that day forward, the misadventures of Mr. Whiskers became legendary in Cloverfield. He continued to bring laughter to everyone he encountered, whether by getting stuck in trees, playing hide-and-seek with unsuspecting children, or photobombing throughout town. And so, with his boundless energy and mischievous spirit, Mr. Whiskers remained the lovable hero of Cloverfield, forever reminding its residents that sometimes a little bit of laughter and mischief can unite an entire community. Everyone in Cloverfield cherished their mischievous feline friend, and the legend of Mr. Whiskers lived on for generations, inspiring joy and mirth in the hearts of all ages. The end. The Misadventures of Professor Fumblebottom. Once upon a time in the vibrant town of Muddleburg, there lived an eccentric professor by the name of Cornelius Fumblebottom. Professor Fumblebottom wore round spectacles perched precariously on his nose, and his wild hair stuck out in all directions. He was renowned for his absent-mindedness and had a knack for finding himself in the most peculiar situations. One sunny day, as the whole town prepared for the annual Muddleburg Fair, Professor Fumblebottom set off on his latest invention, a super-spectacular, self-propelled balloon ride. With his pet parrot, Mr. Squawks-a-Lot, perched atop his cap, the professor planned to take to the skies and showcase his creation to the amused townsfolk. However, things didn't exactly go as planned. As the professor climbed aboard the balloon's wicker basket, he was so engrossed in adjusting his goggles that he accidentally released the anchor, causing the balloon to soar into the sky unexpectedly. Professor Fumblebottom found himself floating aimlessly above Muddleburg, waving frantically at the worried onlookers below. The professor's antics soon attracted the attention of a flock of mischievous seagulls, who mistook the colorful balloon for a giant marshmallow. They fluttered and flapped around the balloon, causing it to spin uncontrollably in midair. With every rotation, the professor's hat would fly off, only to be caught by Mr. Squawks-a-Lot, who would then drop it into the spinning basket once again. Meanwhile, back in Muddleburg, the townsfolk had gathered at the fairgrounds, eagerly awaiting the professor's grand display. When they saw the balloon spinning rapidly overhead, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Word quickly spread, and soon people from all corners of the town came to witness the unforgettable sight. As the professor twirled in the sky, his balloon soared towards the outskirts of town, where they encountered a group of playful monkeys swinging from the trees. One particularly adventurous monkey hopped onto the balloon, mistaking it for a game. The professor, always kind-hearted, laughed along, sharing a banana with the mischievous primate. By the time the balloon began its descent, the professor and his new monkey friend had become quite close. They landed with a gentle thud in the middle of the Muddleburg Fair, attracting even more laughter and applause. The professor's mishap had turned into the highlight of the event. From that day forward, Professor Fumblebottom became a beloved figure in Muddleburg. His enthusiasm and endearing clumsiness reminded everyone to embrace the unexpected joys in life. Every year, he would invite the children of Muddleburg to join him on his annual Laughter and Lark Festival, where they would relive the laughs of his great balloon adventure. So, if you ever find yourself in Muddleburg, keep an eye out for an absent-minded professor with a playful monkey and a parrot on his shoulder. And be sure to join in the laughter, as life's most magical moments can often come from the most unexpected misadventures. The mysterious case of the mischievous monkey. Once upon a time, in a quaint little village nestled between rolling hills and picturesque meadows, lived a mischievous monkey named Marvin. Marvin was no ordinary monkey. He had a knack for causing chaos and leaving a trail of laughter wherever he went. The villagers, young and old, were always prepared for the unexpected whenever Marvin was around. One sunny morning, as the villagers were going about their daily routines, they heard a series of peculiar noises coming from the village square. Curiosity piqued, they hurried to discover the source of the commotion. Lo and behold, there stood Marvin dressed in a miniature detective hat, complete with a magnifying glass hanging from a tiny chain around his neck. The villagers burst into laughter at the sight of the silly monkey, but Marvin, never one to shy away from attention, cleared his throat dramatically. Everyone fell silent, eager to hear what mischief Marvin had gotten himself into this time. With a flourish of his tiny paws, Marvin presented a case file titled The Disappearing Carrots Mystery. The villagers erupted into laughter once more. After all, who in their right mind would steal carrots? But Marvin was not deterred. With an air of importance, he handed out copies of the case file to everyone, insisting that they join him in solving the mystery. Together, the villagers followed Marvin's lead. They interviewed the animals that lived nearby, asking if they had seen anything peculiar. The rabbits claimed innocence, swearing that carrots were their friends, not their enemies. The birds squawked in confusion, declaring that they were too busy singing to notice any peculiarities. Even the cows, who enjoyed munching on grass, denied any involvement. As the investigation progressed, clues began piling up. Marvin's keen monkey instincts led them to the neighboring farm, where they discovered footprints leading into a cabbage field. Following the trail, they stumbled upon a mischievous mole named Monty, covered in dirt, holding a bag full of carrots. Marvin confronted Monty, wagging his finger with mock seriousness. The mole, caught red-handed, burst into laughter, confessing that he couldn't resist the temptation of the sweet, crunchy carrots. The villagers gathered around, chuckling at the sight of Monty's carrot-stained face. They forgave the mischievous mole, recognizing the harmless nature of his mischief. As for Marvin, he beamed with pride, having solved yet another case and made everyone smile. From that day forward, Marvin the monkey became the village's honorary detective, always ready to solve the most ridiculous mysteries. The villagers cherished his presence, frequently finding themselves caught up in laughter-filled adventures led by their furry friend. And so, the mysterious case of the mischievous monkey came to an end. But it was only the beginning of a long series of funny and unforgettable escapades for the villagers of the quaint little village. And through it all, Marvin the monkey remained a beloved hero, bringing joy, humor, and friendship to people of all ages. The Great Cookie Caper. Once upon a time, in the charming town of Sweetville, lived a mischievous raccoon named Rufus. Rufus had a voracious appetite for cookies, and could often be found sneaking into people's homes to satisfy his cravings. His antics had become legendary. And even though he caused a lot of trouble, the townsfolk couldn't help but find his shenanigans amusing. One sunny morning, as the town prepared for its annual baking contest, Rufus sensed something special in the air. The delightful aroma of freshly baked cookies wafted through the streets. Unable to resist the temptation, He followed his nose all the way to the local bakery, where he discovered an extraordinary sight. Evelyn, the baker extraordinaire, was preparing to unveil her latest creation, the world's largest cookie tower. Towering over the entire shop, it boasted colorful layers of chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, and sugar cookies, meticulously stacked one on top of the other. Rufus's little heart skipped a beat as he imagined sinking his teeth into such a treat. With an audacious grin on his furry face, Rufus devised a plan to obtain the cookies without being caught. Late that night, when the town was fast asleep, he made his move. Using his nimble raccoon hands, he climbed the walls of the bakery, avoiding every creaky floorboard. As Rufus reached the top, his stomach growled with anticipation, but little did he know that Evelyn had anticipated his visit. Just as he was about to grab the most delicious cookie at the pinnacle, a trapdoor opened beneath him, and he tumbled down into a secret room. Unfazed by his unexpected turn of events, Rufus found himself face to face with Evelyn, who wore a playful smirk on her face. She revealed that she had designed the trapdoor in order to catch him red-handed. Instead of being angry, Evelyn was impressed by Rufus's determination and love for cookies. Evelyn then proposed a deal. If Rufus promised to help her bake an even better cookie tower for the contest, she would reward him with a lifetime supply of cookies. Rufus, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to enjoy all the cookies he could ever dream of, eagerly agreed. From that day forward, Rufus and Evelyn became an unstoppable cookie-baking duo. They spent hours perfecting their recipes, experimenting with new flavors and textures. Rufus even became an expert at taste testing, using his extraordinary palate to ensure each cookie was the best it could be. The day of the baking contest arrived, and the townsfolk marveled at the towering masterpiece created by Rufus and Evelyn. The cookie tower was a work of art, capturing the imagination of everyone who laid eyes on it. As the judges tasted the cookies, their faces lit up with joy. The overall winner was, of course, the exceptional cookie tower from Sweetville's very own bakery. The crowd erupted with applause, cheering not only for the delicious cookies but for the unlikely partnership between a talented baker and a mischievous raccoon. Rufus and Evelyn stood side by side, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. Together, they had turned mischievousness into a force for good, bringing smiles and laughter to the entire town of Sweetville. And so, the legend of Rufus, the cookie-loving raccoon, and Evelyn, the talented baker, lived on for years to come, reminding everyone that even the most unexpected partnerships can create sweetness in life. The Misadventures of Professor Quirky. Once upon a time, in a small town called Whimsyville, there lived a peculiar but lovable professor named Dr. Quincy Quirky. Dr. Quirky was known for his unconventional methods and quirky inventions. Wherever he went, laughter and chaos followed. This is the story of one of his most unforgettable misadventures. One sunny day, Dr. Quirky woke up with an idea that tickled his brain. He decided that he had finally cracked the code to make the world's largest pancake. With enthusiasm radiating from every pore, he hurriedly gathered all the essential ingredients and set up an outdoor laboratory in the middle of town. Whimsyville had never seen such a commotion before. Curious townsfolk gathered around, intrigued by the professor's ambitious endeavor. As Dr. Quirky began mixing his batter, he added his secret ingredient, a pinch of magic dust he had stumbled upon in his basement. Little did he know, this magic dust had a mind of its own. As soon as the magical element mingled with the mix, the concoction began to froth and bubble ferociously. Before Dr. Quirky could react, the batter erupted like a volcano, splattering everywhere. Pancake batter rained down on the spectators, transforming them into fluffy, butter-loving creatures. With a mix of terror and amusement, the townsfolk morphed into pancake people. They wobbled around, pancake-shaped bodies flopping joyfully. Dr. Quirky, however, remained unaffected. Perplexed but unfazed. He realized that only the people closest to him were affected by the magical mishap. Determined to reverse the spell, Dr. Quirky started gathering all sorts of toppings: syrup, strawberries, whipped cream, and even a few cherries on top. He hoped that the flavors would restore his friends to their original form. Armed with a mountain of pancake toppings, he declared, "Fear not, the hilarious rescue mission starts now." The professor embarked on a quest, searching high and low for his pancake-covered friends. He followed the maple-scented trail, stumbling across pancake people engaged in unexpected activities. There were pancake firefighters trying to put out pancake fires, which proved challenging as they kept eating the extinguishers. Pancake police officers chasing after pancake thieves, who were stealing pancakes from themselves, and pancake athletes attempting pancake gymnastics, but it was tough when they couldn't bend. As Dr. Quirky navigated through Whimsyville, he cleverly devised hilarious solutions for each situation. He built pancake trampolines to help the pancake mail carrier reach the top of the mailbox, constructed pancake structures for pancake architects, and even organized a pancake fashion show where pancake people adorned themselves with colorful sprays of whipped cream. Through these whimsical escapades, laughter spread throughout Whimsyville. The pancake people embraced their newfound forms, jumping and flipping with delight. The town transformed into a pancake paradise, filled with giggles and grins. Finally, after a series of uproarious adventures, Dr. Quirky stumbled upon a hidden stash of golden syrup. With the help of his magical ingredient, he whipped up a batch of syrupy elixir to pour over his pancake friends. The moment the sweet nectar touched their fluffy surfaces, the pancake people returned to their human forms, sticky but smiling. Dr. Quirky's pancake mishap had brought the community closer together, spreading joy and laughter far and wide. And though his experiment didn't quite go as planned, he discovered that sometimes the most delightful and memorable moments come from unexpected twists and turns. From that day forward, whenever someone in Whimsyville mentioned pancakes, smiles would light up their faces as they fondly recalled the time they transformed into pancake people. Dr. Quirky became a beloved figure, forever remembered as the ingenious inventor who inadvertently turned an entire town into a stack of pancakes, and brought them back again. And thus, the legend of the misadventures of Professor Quirky, the pancake savior, continued to be retold with laughter and joy for generations to come. The misadventures of Mr. Whiskers. Once upon a time in the bustling town of Gigglesville, there lived a peculiar cat named Mr. Whiskers. With his vibrant orange fur and mischievous amber eyes, he was known to be the town's resident troublemaker. But despite his troublesome nature, Mr. Whiskers possessed a heart of gold. One sunny morning, Mr. Whiskers woke up feeling unusually adventurous. He decided that it was time to explore beyond the boundaries of Gigglesville and venture into the neighboring village, Laughterland. With a skip in his step, Mr. Whiskers headed out on his hilarious journey. Along the way, he encountered a troop of dancing squirrels who taught him some nifty tap dance moves. Mr. Whiskers danced through the fields, causing giggles to erupt from every corner. As he continued on his merry way, Mr. Whiskers stumbled upon a bakery run by a clumsy but kind-hearted man named Mr. Sprinkles. The aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air, and it was simply irresistible to Mr. Whiskers. Unable to resist his feline instincts, he snuck into the bakery and indulged himself in an abundance of cookies. Unfortunately, his rambunctious eating led to a rather humorous mishap. As Mr. Whiskers tried to squeeze through the door frame, he found himself stuck, his round belly preventing any escape. The locals couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of Mr. Whiskers wiggling and wriggling, trying to free himself from the bakery doorway. When Mr. Sprinkles discovered the predicament, instead of getting angry, he burst into laughter. He gently untangled Mr. Whiskers and offered him a box of cookies as a peace offering. From that day forward, the two became unlikely friends, sharing countless amusing moments together. With his new companion, Mr. Whiskers continued his journey into Laughterland. To his amazement, this enchanting village thrived on comedy. He stumbled upon a circus and decided to try his paw at becoming a clown. Little did he know, Mr. Whiskers was a natural-born entertainer. His acrobatic antics and comical expressions brought joy to everyone's faces. Word of the talented feline performer spread like wildfire, and soon the biggest comedy show in Laughterland invited Mr. Whiskers to be their star. Night after night, he left the audience roaring with laughter. Mr. Whiskers had finally found his true calling. As time passed, Mr. Whiskers realized how much he missed his home in Gigglesville. With a heavy heart, he bid farewell to Laughterland and returned to his beloved town. The residents welcomed him back with open arms, grateful for the mirth he brought to their lives. From that day forward, Mr. Whiskers dedicated himself to spreading joy in Gigglesville. He taught children how to perform silly tricks, organized hilarious game nights at the local park, and even started a laughter yoga class for the adults. The once troublemaking cat had become a source of laughter and happiness for the entire community. And so, Mr. Whiskers lived happily ever after, reminding us all that sometimes a little curiosity and mischief can lead to the most extraordinary adventures. His legacy remained, making Gigglesville forever known as the town that never stopped laughing. The Misadventures of Professor Paws. Once upon a time, in a small town called Whiskerville, there was a peculiar professor named Professor Paws. Now, Professor Paws wasn't your typical professor. He had the body of a cat and the mind of a genius. His dream was to invent something extraordinary that would make everyone laugh and bring joy to their lives. One sunny day, Professor Paws woke up with a brilliant idea. He decided to create a machine that could translate animal language into human language. With this invention, people would finally be able to communicate with their furry friends. Overjoyed, Professor Paws began gathering all the necessary materials in his cluttered laboratory. After days of tinkering and testing, the moment of truth arrived. Professor Paws unveiled his invention, a contraption resembling a colorful accordion, and named it the Chatterbox. He turned it on and eagerly awaited its magic. But instead of translating animal language, the Chatterbox spat out a blinding beam of light that engulfed the entire lab. When the light dissipated, Professor Paws discovered that something peculiar had happened. The Chatterbox had transformed all the animals in Whiskerville into talking creatures. Dogs barked in poetic verse. Birds chirped jokes, and even fish gossiped about the latest ocean news. News of the miraculous transformation spread quickly throughout the town. People from all walks of life flocked to Professor Paws' lab to witness this extraordinary event. Entrepreneurs saw an opportunity to open pet talent agencies, while comedians started teaching animals how to tell jokes. As days turned into weeks, however, chaos ensued. Animal conversations became the soundtrack of daily life, interrupting meetings, and even causing traffic jams. Dogs argued with cats about the best way to catch mice, while parrots relentlessly imitated their owners' embarrassing secrets. It seemed that the once harmonious town of Whiskerville had turned into a zoo without bars. Determined to fix his mistake, Professor Paws gathered the greatest minds in town for an emergency meeting. Together, they devised a plan to reverse the effects of the Chatterbox. With teamwork and ingenuity, they built a massive speaker system to broadcast a frequency that would restore animals to their normal state. An announcement was made, requesting every animal owner to bring their pets to the town square. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as Whiskerville's residents eagerly awaited the moment when things would return to normal. Finally, the moment arrived. Professor Paws stepped onto the makeshift stage and initiated the frequency. A wave of calmness washed over the square as one by one, animals returned to their natural selves. Dogs barked enthusiastically, cats purred contentedly, and birds sang melodies of gratitude. Whiskerville had learned an important lesson from Professor Paws' misadventure. They realized that although understanding animals might have seemed like a fun idea, it was equally important to respect their unique languages and natures. From that day forward, Professor Paws continued his experiments, but with more caution. He invented new gadgets that brought amusement without disrupting the harmony of the town. And the people of Whiskerville cherished their four-legged friends, knowing that laughter and love were the best ways to communicate. And so, the town of Whiskerville lived happily ever after, thanks to the misadventures and wisdom of Professor Paws.